Great. Well, welcome everybody to this workshop, this long-term plan workshop, which is on environmental regulation and protection. We have with us this morning for our introduction, Amy Ellison, Kama Marsh and Pip Moore. And then after the introductions, we'll move over into Brett Aldridge and Paul Holst to take us through our long-term plan discussion on this service. So over to the team. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou. Did you have a question?
Oh, no, you're right. We haven't done our opening karakia. It was... I think I am on. Today is, yes, Councillor John Faulkner.
Tuatahi te mihi ki te kaianga, te matua, te tama, te warua tapu, he te toka mai ai. I nā mana, i nā rio, i nā karangataha mai. Haere mai ki te kapapa, ara te kikorio o te kunehera. O ka hātau, taio, no rewa, tēnei te mio aroha, kia koutou katoa. First of all, thanks to the Creator, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit for your support, the powers, the voices, the people who come to the program, and the voice of the Council of Environmental Leaders. This is my heartfelt thanks to you all.
Thank you very much. And now over to the team. Thanks.
Kia ora tātou, councillors. So as we promised you yesterday and probably previously, we're not the harbingers of doom or the riders of the dawn or whatever, but we are the three people. We are the three people who will be your constant reminder of process and the end point that these sessions lead us to, which is the LTP. So the team, as we said, and we will streamline this because you'll probably get really, you'll get the idea. But the team will run you through the thermometer and any other salient points. Just a reminder that these deep dives are our bigger ticket items. So we've started with the big spends and getting down to the lower spends. So it will be a bit of a shock looking at the numbers when we've stacked them up of things that we've shown you and that you might be interested in. That's just part of the process. We will get to the trade-off stage or the reduction stage, and also just a reminder that within the organisation, we are also looking not just about the coins down the side of the couch, but actually what are the things we can stop, what are the things that we can hold steady, and what are the things that actually, if we're looking toward renovation, what are the things that might need some added investment. So those things will also be wound in, so that's something to very much look forward to. But I will hand over to my team.
Kia ora, councillors. So we're back again today, this time to talk about ERP services. Yesterday, we talked through CPRH services, and after the activity at the end of the day, you gave us an indication that you'd be comfortable with about approximately 2% rates increase for CPNRH. So that's on top of where we think we would be conservatively with public transport, and so that's we're sitting now at about a 10.5% rates increase based on your indications. However, today, Brett and Paul are going to take you through the authorisations, incident response and compliance services within ERP. These sessions will provide you with a deep understanding of the work streams within each service, the value that work delivers, how much it costs, what we know, what we don't know, and then we'll test your initial guidance about the services that you've given us already and have a discussion about where you think we need to be. There is a lot to get through today, so we will leave you in the hands of... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Carmen.
Can you just go back to this one?
Yep.
Sorry, I would just add in for the thermometer, as Pip said, it's conservative. We haven't built in inflation into that yet. So the public transport team have included inflation in what they put to you last week. But for CPRH and where we get to with ERP, that doesn't take account of any inflationary impacts yet either. So it is conservative. We will work with the finance team to more fully understand what that inflationary impact would look like for the other services.
Cool. Thank you. Sorry.
Before you leave the table, we do have one question from a councillor.
Can I just get some clarity, Carmen? When you talk about conservative, you're talking about less than. Generally, for those of us older councillors that have sort of been here and on rinse and repeat, conservative means the bigger envelope. So as long as we're very, very clear, and that you're very clear every time you speak to this council table, because some of us, when you said conservative, I'm thinking it's the top of the outer extent of the envelope. But what I'm hearing you say is this is not the outer extent.
Just to clarify, it is the opposite. It's likely more than 10.5% now, because we haven't built in any inflationary increases for CPRH or where we get to with ERP at this point in time. So 10.5% is probably more the minimal end right now of where we're looking at so far.
Great.
Okay, we'll turn over to two of ECAN's greatest storytellers, Brett and Paul.
Okay, we have one more question, actually. If you don't mind, one more question and then we'll move on. So, Councillor Moody.
So are those numbers 8.5 and 2, are they cumulative? I had assumed it was 8.5 total and that 2% was part of it, but you're adding them together to form the total current projected rates increase necessary to deliver what council has so far said we'd like. Is that right?
That's correct. So it's about 8.5% for PT, but they're still doing the modelling of their very detailed financial numbers behind the scenes. And then based on the guidance from yesterday, that equated to about another 2% increase in rates overall. So the two added together, it's about 10.5%, but just what I was signalling is it's likely higher than that because we haven't added inflation into that for...
Thank you. Yeah, on that same theme of what is conservative, is it more or less? I mean, for me, the colour on the thermometer is, I don't think the colour is necessary moving forward, because it implies that it's getting stopped, as you're getting too high, green, go, and it's a value judgment that was the opposite of how I saw it. So I would probably just have it as a scale with no colour, and then we haven't have to worry about conservative, we don't have to worry about stop, go, we're just talking about the numbers.
We're absolutely open to feedback and clarification. I'd just draw your attention to these are not decisions at this point. These are things that we've seen demonstrated interest in. I'll just draw your attention to the 2.9%, which council did give us a direction that was the likely amount that you were interested in for a rates increase, and that has been confirmed several times, not just in the workshop but also in the chamber. So again, that's not a decision because we've got to run through the process. So that's why the colourway is like that, but just a visual representation of what you had indicated to where we have got to. But again, no decisions have been made yet, and the LTP process is rolling through, and we'll get to November, and then we may ask you to make some decisions.
Right, thanks for clarifying what the colours are up to as well. Cheers.
Yep, based on what we've given direction to staff. So thank you. So, welcome to the table. Before we get started, I just wanted to run through the expectation around timeframes and how this is going to run for the day, and check in to see if this aligns with what you intend and make any adjustments. So we have until 11:45 for the session, and then we have a break for lunch, and then we come back and we've got until 12:15, so 2:30 until 12:15. So that's allowing quite a lot of time for this session. However, there's 69 slides that we need to get through. So we have a lot of material to cover. And from what I understand from looking at the slides and the presentation, there's an intention for this to be content heavy. And then after going through the content, 15 minutes of discussion for each of the three. We were just generally going to check in and test with councillors whether they agree with the assumptions, if there's any gaps in the services identified or any problems. What I wanted to know is built into the information session and not the 15 minutes, is there time for councillors to ask questions or not?
Yes, the 15 minutes is questions,
Is the
discussion.
question time?
Yep.
Okay, great. So we'll take you through the presentation, then 15 minutes per subject. Okay, hands up quickly, guys, if you want to get in, because 15 minutes is going to be quick. But and so we go authorisations. That will take us through to slide 20, then incident response, and then compliance. Given that the timeframes are short and we're going to have more opportunity to come back and talk about this, please keep your questions, one or two, short, sharp, concise. And I won't be necessarily doing first and first serve. I'll be making sure that everybody has an opportunity to speak. Question on process, John? Oh, you're trying to get in first and first serve. Okay, got it. Let's move over to start with the presentation. And as I said before, it might not be a first and first serve basis. I'll be spreading it around to make sure everyone has the opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning, Council. Okay, let's start off. So the purpose and overview is really to provide a couple of deep dives and really talk about authorisations, compliance and incident response. And on the slide, you will see what that covers. And it's very broad spectrum of activities beyond the requirements that are set out in the Resource Management Act. So we are narrowing it. We can't have that discussion for everything today. So we are not including anything that's got a red line through it. So biosecurity compliance, land and water function, and marine oil spills are not part of discussion. So as we work through, keep your minds that we're talking about RMA consenting, fast track approvals, gravel permits, our building consent authority for large dams function, permitted activities, in our incident response, that is RMA consents and permitted activities and Building Act, and similarly for our compliance work.
So good morning, councillors. So just take you through the work streams and the service. So as you'll know, the RMA consenting function, that predominantly is the major service that we provide. Next to it is growing, is our fast track approval work. That has increased and likely to continue. We also have building consent authority responsibilities. So we're responsible for, under the Building Act, for large dams. And they also, as you'll know well, we're responsible for gravel authorisations as well. So it's quite a broad service. And so the purposes of these authorisations, I think it's a really useful slide to remind us of these things. Authorisation provide resource users a licence to operate, enable economic activity while managing the effects on the environment, cultural and social values via conditions. It's a contract between the consent holder, the community and Environment Canterbury as a consenting authority. It's the key mechanism for delivering management of environment, the management of the environment as set out in plans which have been developed with our communities. We normally process around 1,600 applications a year. Things are changing. We'd like to see that reduce, and the slides further on say we've got some predictions as well around renewals. I think you've seen these before. And we do have fast tracked, as I've said as well. So 5 have been decided, 6 in referrals process. But the requirement, it takes a lot to turn around fast track as well, and that's increased, as I've said, over the year. Again, while we've got the time with you, I thought it'd be important to say, well, what else do we do? Well, within the authorisations or consent service, we've got financial and administration responsibilities. We do consent support. Pre-applications is a major focus to try and get the applications into the right standards so that we can process them as quickly and as promptly as possible. As I've said, we've got building consent sector support, so we work with other councils, we collaborate with central government, we share expertise and guidance and best practice. We build knowledge and capability, we train our staff, we get a lot of junior staff through the door, we've got to get them to a competent space as quickly as possible, so that does take quite a bit of effort. We're following strategic and national contributions, so we support other local government authorities and provide technical feedback to ministries. That's increased. And then we've got relationship management, so engagement with external parties to ensure smoother processes. We speak to banks quite a lot, consultants and significant consent holders. And again, we do a lot of work around the fast track work.
So I think what's important there is that although we talk about consent processing, there is a lot behind that. It is a bit more than just a consent application in the door. We process it and out. But on that, outcomes. So and by outcomes, I'm not talking about environmental outcomes. I'm talking about the outcomes the service delivers. And I really wanted to talk about the top bullet point. Because the RMA is a restrictive act. So without a plan or a consent, you effectively, with the exception of land use, you are unable to do anything legally. And so just to set a context, our plans and consenting activity is actually an enabling function. It's seen as a barrier and restrictive, but it is actually an enabling function that enables our industries and community to do business effectively. And it's an important point that I think we forget a little bit. So the outcomes are really, yes, we unlock resource use development opportunities through administration of plans and resource consents. We enable community aspirations by implementing the outcomes and directions set through national and regional planning frameworks, and support sustainable management of Canterbury's natural and physical resources as we do that. We seek to make regulatory decisions that appropriately manage risk without creating unnecessary regulatory burden, and that is about applying balance within that process, and that is a very nuanced and difficult decision-making process. That is where we aim to be. And we provide legally robust, transparent, defensible decisions that withstand scrutiny and reduce litigation risks, and give confidence to council, our customers, community, that decisions are fair, consistent and evidence-based.
So just a high level on the numbers, the total cost for the service is 27.2 million. You'll see on the far right-hand side, those are the different activities and how it's broken down. And then we've got the breakdown of cost by direct or indirect. And then at the very top on the left, we're showing how we pay for those costs in the sense you've got the cost recovery versus general rates proportion as well. So yeah, a total of 27.2 for this service.
So we want to take you through some known knowns, and on the next slide there'll be some known unknowns, I think we've called it, or unknown knowns. Look, we know there's a new resource management system that is coming. It's aiming to reduce consent volumes and scope via national standardisation and front-loading of community input. Those national instruments are going to be absolutely critical to this. We know short-term we're going to see fewer RMA applications, circa 1,200 per year, down from, I think it was 1,600 or 1,800. But the applications for these new activities and changes are likely to be a little more complicated. They're likely to be at the higher end of the or the more complicated end of decision making. Our fast track process, we know it's going to continue. We know it's going to continue to operate alongside that legislation, and we are seeing volumes increase. We're seeing more choosing to go down fast track path. We also know that reduced processing provides it's going to provide us with some capacity over the transition period to improve our processes and guidance, to reduce applicant costs and create a fit-for-purpose approach. And hopefully while retaining needed experience and knowledge. And we'll get to this in a minute. There's a graph, but we think we're going to, in this downturn period of consents, is the time we're going to need to build. We're going to need to build new process and test it. And we also know we're going to have to rebuild our processes. We have to rebuild fact sheets, workflows, policies. I guess the key point is, that the reduction in consent volumes may provide us space and opportunity. So we have some known unknowns, and we really are yet to see the final shape of local government reform and its impact on regulatory functions. We have a bill for the House, but RMA reform is yet to be finalised. We will have requirements emerging from national direction and instruments, and as I said, that is critical. That will be critical to narrow the funnel so that consenting can focus on very clear effects. We know we're going to have future renewal volumes and workload peaks. The scale of change across our services, we don't know, actually. We don't know the scale of change required across our services. We don't know the impact of ongoing uncertainty on our workforce capability, our capacity to retain as people make decisions in a world of uncertainty. And we don't know the potential impact of national digital systems and processes. And this speaks to, we are going to need to do some platform work. And we don't really have a clear sight of what's going to be nationally led. And so we are in the position of not wanting to make regretful spends in that space and to try and work out where we invest. Our response is to plan for multiple scenarios rather than a single future state. So we are wanting to build a business that can flex and is agile to really continue to deliver in whatever future state comes. And we'll continue to make decisions based on the best available information we have and just remain flexible to change. So this is a graph, and maybe I won't go into the detail too much, other than what it shows is a couple of peaks. So the grey peak is the extension of expiries for, I think it's 3 years, I want to say 3 years. And alongside that, you've got the orange peak, which is also some mention about extending a further time period out. So what that will do is provide us a couple of big peaks in the future. But as you'll see through the middle, the blue and orange histogram boxes show us the level of consents we'll see. So we will have, and this is an assumption, but we're assuming we're going to see reduced volumes over that period. And as I said earlier, that provides us with opportunity. And it provides us with opportunity to rebuild process and test it with volumes that are manageable. Yeah, and we have some ambitions for our authorisations function. We do want to become a smart and enabling regulator, and we have spoken about that previously. We have a demand-driven business, and so we need to build that business so it can scale to demand up and down, and just build agility into our business models. We have a desire to have a process that can balance environmental risk with regulatory burden so that we are not asking for more than is required to make decisions and manage risk appropriately. We have a desire to have a high quality available data to support decision making, and we have a program in place around water allocation data to provide exactly that and allow us to have much more scientifically backed data to allocate water. We do want to provide and articulate value for money. I think that's absolutely critical with ongoing process efficiency. We want to engage with communities and industry to deliver pragmatic solutions to environmental outcomes, and we want to be agile to respond to legislative changes, service demand and ongoing uncertainty. And to achieve that, we are going to have to focus on building platforms, process and policy and people over the next 2 to 3 years. Is it me or you? Okay. I can do it. Our consent service operates off a user pays revenue model. It's a mix of fixed fees, initial fixed fees, which could be considered deposits, and then time and materials and cost recovery for those. We introduced fixed fees through the last long-term plan, and we use those not as widely as we'd want to, but we have them in place. We are not proposing to change the current revenue model, but it does work. As I said earlier, it's a demand-driven service, and so we need to scale to meet that demand. We do have current and near-term challenges around the uncertainty created by legislative reform. We're starting to see it shape, but I also think we will have space to deal with that. We have confidence we can deliver that within the current budget with some appropriate user pays ratepayer balance. I think the key point is the current revenue model doesn't require change, but we are likely to want a shift in general rates proportion from 30% to 40% to be sustainable long term. And that has just played out in our year-on-year ability to meet budgets. We are sitting at about, what is it? I think we're under recovered by 2 million, but 40% seems to be the right balance to make our budget work. I should note that in that we do recover 100% of our costs from applicants, so all time spent on consents is recovered. But there's a lot of it, and you would have seen it in the earlier slides. So there's a lot of administrative. And obviously that 40% takes into account leave and public holidays and things like that. So that's where we're likely to be asking. So what I'll do is, this slide is where you got to with authorisations. The key priorities were to continue efficiency and platform improvements, continue processing consents and delivering to national direction, remain flexible and agile. We had some key assumptions, but the key point is that at our last discussion, the indication from Council was to hold steady or reduce. And I think it's a demand-driven service, this one. We need to meet that demand, whether it's up or down. So what I might do is just do a very quick summary of the points that we've gone through, and then we'll open for discussion. So we are likely to see a drop in volumes for consent applications. We're going to need to rebuild a new RMA authorisation process, which is actually a huge opportunity as well to address some of the shortcomings we have in our current process. We are going to see an extension of resource consent expiries, and we'll likely see lower volumes correspond with the period where that build needs to happen. We think we'll be able to deliver business as usual and build new process within the current rate-funded budget. And it means while we will scale down, we will not see savings. We will see that funding get put into the build that needs to happen as we change to meet the requirements of the new RMA reform. And finally, we think we're going to need to change our budget ratepayer funded user pay split to 60-40%.
Great, thank you. Really helpful and informative presentation. So for the next 15 minutes, the discussion really for councillors to have is about whether councillors agree with these assumptions. Are there any gaps in the services that have not been identified? And is there any burning problems with what's been presented? If you do have questions, that's fine. However, this is our opportunity to be giving some direction on the long-term plan on this particular subject. That's really the core purpose of this part of the session. Given that we've got until 2:15, what I'm going to say is we will stick to the 15 minutes after each, but if we have catch-up time later, then there will be the opportunity. So note down, if we don't get to you, note down the discussion point that you want to raise, and we might get time for it later. And if we've missed out, then come and have a discussion with me, and we'll see how we can incorporate it. But for now, we'll go through until 11:05, and we're going to start with Councillor Faulkner, then Councillor Campbell.
Thank you for that. Going back to page 13, where we've got the total figures, and I look at the split cost recovery general rates, and at a superficial level, 65-35, and I did the maths. If we went to an 80-20 model, then that gives about roughly just under 3% reduction in potential rates. But then when I go to page 17 and you're talking about 18, about the changes to the ratepayer model, and you're talking about increasing it. So at a superficial level, I'm going, we'll reduce the ratepayer model and increase the user pay, but you're saying that we need to go the other way. I'm just not clear on the rationale.
Yeah, so what we're seeing currently with the, I think it's 65-35 split, we're not able to achieve that with the volumes that are coming in. So as Brett's highlighted, it's demand driven, so we've had less consents coming in. We can't cost recover at the same levels. We're predicting that will continue. And so a sustainable split in these early discussions would be a 60-40 split. And what Brett's signalling is the ability to reinvest into rebuilding systems, processes and platforms in that 3 to 6 year period, 3 year period initially. So yeah, that's a conversation for this council to have. Yeah.
So my 80-20 split wouldn't work?
I don't believe so. I think if you go back to the original slides, we try to give you the breadth of all the non-user paid work that we do, whether it's pre-application services or dealing with central government and all that sort of stuff, that takes up a whole lot of our work as well. So with that and with that and reduced consent volumes, I don't think an 80-20 split would work.
Councillor Campbell.
I've got two questions, one of which is also about this, but just very briefly, on page 13, PREE, what does that stand for?
That relates to Papatipurunanga environmental entities that we work with.
So back to the ratepayer versus general rates. I understand there's not enough demand to get back the 60. I was going to ask the same thing. Another part of the question is there any way to work in an element of public good versus private profit into the fees? And so, for example, composting barns was one I thought of, but that's probably a territorial authority consent. Wetland, a consent to construct or restore a wetland. Is it possible that could have a discount for public good, whereas a discharge to land could have a premium for public harm, private profit? I'm just wondering, does it have to be, or can we use these to start incentivising what we want and disincentivising what we don't want?
I suspect the answer is yes. Through policy or fees and charges application, you could do that. We currently do have provision to reduce consenting costs for charities or organisations. We have that at the moment, but there's always a cost somewhere. So where you don't recover the cost, there's probably a burden on the general rate. But certainly, if there was a priority or an incentivisation that you wanted to encourage, you could use policy and application of fees and charges to achieve that.
Yeah, I just feel that with limited tools at our disposal to encourage and discourage, maybe we should be investigating the discount versus the premium for public good versus public harm and or private profit. And I'm not saying it absolutely is doable, but I think it's something we should investigate.
I think we do discount to a certain extent where we see a public good. I would be wary of using the disincentive. I think that is appropriately done through the planning process, and which sets the policies and rules around what can and can't be done to then have another crack at it through the consent process. I don't think would be appropriate.
Okay, so next is Councillor Moody, then Councillor Claire Mackay. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Thanks, guys. So where you're saying that your recommendation is 40% general rate rather than the 30. So if you didn't get that, would that lead potentially to the risk of a backlog of unprocessed consents? Is that sort of because you're saying like, well, we can't afford to pay the staff because we're not getting enough consents in the applications in the door? Like, what happens if you don't get the 10% is probably the broader question.
Yeah, and no, it won't affect processing consents. What it will affect is just what we've found is the reality of running the service is that if no consent comes through the door tomorrow, we still need the service. We have to have it sitting there waiting.
Brett, just while you're talking about this, could we bring up slide 11? Because I think that, again, just it's helpful in the answer to your question.
Yeah, it's just we've found our experiences, the administrative burden, leave, sick leave, public holidays, admin, training is about 40% of our cost. The rest we can recover directly through from applicants and applications for resource consent.
So if you don't have that 40%, if it's 30%, then you can't pay enough staff to have the capacity to process consents when they come in, and do the other work as well. And I still haven't got an answer. What happens if you don't have the money?
We run a budget deficit, and it gets at the end of the year mopped up through the financial, accounting and paid for by ratepayer funding, I suspect.
Great, thank you. Councillor Claire Mackay and then Ian McKenzie.
My question relates to that 13, the direct costs versus indirect costs, and I guess you're touching on it around those percentages, because if I think about how that feels out of whack to me, because of any of us that's been in business, you would be looking really, really hard at your business structure. So then I go back to looking at all the options or the stuff that we do on slide 11. And I'm going to be a little bit selfish now. We're going through a reform and context, and I do ask myself, is there some opportunities there to perhaps look at our external work that we do, the related external work, and actually become a little bit more focused in the next couple of 3 years, given the reform and the change potentially, focusing on ourselves. So I'm just wondering whether staff are looking at those sorts of options.
The short answer is yes, we are. We've done, we have 800 plus service lines that we've identified right across our business. Each one of those
It's helpful.
My question's been modified a bit on the run because I think my initial question has been answered about the overhead cost of the back office stuff. I thought there was going to be a saving, but in fact it's the cost, the savings from the applicant, not to the council. But when you're rebuilding for this smart enabler, once will that enable? It goes back to one of John's earlier questions. Does that enable, in time, will that enable you to recover a higher proportion of those back office costs, or lower those back office costs to the point where there is a saving to everybody?
Eventually,
The answer is I'm not sure. I'm not. Look, I think we can find efficiencies in our back office, and there's some options for automation and a few other things that will definitely find savings in there. How much? I don't know. That's something we would just have to continually build on.
So the smart enabler in the first instance will lower the cost of the applicant's cost.
I think it will do both.
So, Brett, could you also just, because the microphone was off for Councillor McKenzie, could you put the question into the answer of it will do both?
So as I understand it, the question was, will smart enabling regulator reduce the cost to the applicant and also the cost to council? Was that the question?
Yeah, it's both.
Yeah, it will intend to do both. I think what you'll see is the applicant will see the reduction first, but it's entirely logical that if we improve process and systems, then the back office would improve over time as well.
Perhaps the one comment I would make is we are very manual at the moment, and so we have opportunity for automation.
Thank you. Councillor Davis and then Councillor Robinson.
This picks up on what I'm thinking. Didn't you bring your crystal ball with you, Brett? Because I'm wondering, so your ambition about this migrating the workflow into online in the cloud platforms, do you think that doing that will actually help the TAs, let's just say, providing the service out to the wider TAs? Is it going to make you more transferable or more adaptable?
I'm not sure about me, but definitely that is the ambition, is to make the business well run and easy, so that when it transfers, it is seen as a well-run, easy business and not a problem and difficulty, because we want to land it in a way that it does continue to serve Canterbury. It's a very important service.
Just to follow on that, I know you don't have a crystal ball, so they think that it's going to save this, making everything, a lot, the activities more permitted. Chris Bishop said something like $13.3 billion, but that might not be us because our things are more complicated. Everything, the permitted stuff, it'll be more for the TAs are going to save a ton of money, but we might actually end up spending more money. I mean, that's the crystal ball question.
Yeah, I agree that when we're talking about the RMA, there's the TA side and then there's the regional council side, and I think you probably are right. I think what we know is we're going to see a reduction in consents. What activities that particular lands in, it's still unknown. But I would imagine there'll still be a huge need for consenting going forward, and that's what we're trying. But as Brett says, our only way to manage that is to have a flexible system that can adapt to peaks and reductions. But I don't suspect there'll be that many savings. I'm not sure.
Councillor Robinson.
A lot of it's been discussed, but I'll try and put my tweak onto it. With regards to the revenue and financing policy we've got, with regards to the general rates, and it's been discussed for consenting, I do have a hesitancy in actually suggesting an increase in the general rates proportion, because it's it's still, in essence, a highly urbanised rating system that goes to private, But I understand that you need to find money from somewhere. So I think an adjustment of somewhere in between 35 and 40 would sit better, like maybe 38. I know that sounds ridiculous, but 40 is too high based on our own policies as well. And also just with regards to the incentives for things like wetlands, and I think I agree with you, Brett, that we need to be very, very careful because wetlands has a broad range of who considers what to be a wetland, and it could be for the wrong purpose, not for biodiversity reasons. And that's why I'm cautious. And I think, it goes back to the planning rules and the likes, but that's just my commentary.
Good.
The
Great.
question,
Good, thank you, because that is the point of the session, right? To give some real clear direction. We often fall into the habit of asking questions. So, well, and this long-term plan sessions are entirely about setting the direction and making that really clear. We've got time for one last question that's going to be from Councillor Gerard.
Statement, right?
Yeah, statement, not question.
Yeah,
statement.
just
Opinion.
coming from a corporate working background, hourly rates again. Are we actually looking at increasing our fees to help cover costs? And because I think our rates are pretty low as far as across the industry.
Sorry, I accidentally before you finished. Sorry about that. Yes, so the council has the ability to review fees and charges annually. We haven't done last year, but through this process, there would be the ability to review the hourly rates, the deposits, and the fixed fees. And you normally in those, if you're not even if you're not predicting significant changes in hourly rates, you would apply inflation and things like that. So that is entirely an option for this council.
Yes, certainly. In the corporate world, your hourly rate covers all these. On page 11. So it's sort of, can we build in our costs that way?
And that may be a way of keeping the rate component lower.
Thank you. And if we do go ahead with that work, it would also be interesting to know what other councils charge, because we aren't actually a corporate. So we need to keep that in mind as well. Yeah. So now we'll move on to the compliance section. And again, at the end of that, we have 15 minutes allocated for discussion. Compliance.
You incident response or compliance?
The PowerPoint has compliance next, but are you moving to... Oh, no, sorry, I'm on slide 20. I've got the wrong one. Slide 22, incident response. Through until slide 30.
So through the chair, this is the incident response service. So councillors will know this service well. It's to respond and resolve to environmental harm or incidents as are reported by the community. What we do within the service, we triage, provide response and assessment. Our focus is to stop the harm and consider consequences and take action. The types of the levels of response that we have for this service, we run a 24-hour pollution hotline. We roster staff in the large urban centres of Timaru and Christchurch. We don't respond after dark because of health and safety matters. All incidents are logged. All complaints receive a response or should receive a response. And it's triaged to ensure that we respond to the most highest priority of incidents. This is a total general rates funded service. We don't recover costs for this. We can, dependent on the types of investigation we do, recover the cost, but in the main, this is a general rate funded 3.5 million service. And the purpose is, and this is really important, the incident response, at least the pollution hotline or the way that we have smelt it, allows for the community to be our eyes and ears to raise concerns around environmental harm. It provides a rapid response to environmental harm. We provide quick and timely advice to limit harm. So there's many circumstances where we're out providing advice to the fire service, say, for example, where we can provide advice to stop harm on discharges. Going one step further, it allows us to work with organisations to protect protection of the environment to broader incidents where we're not necessarily the lead, so we're always part of the conversation. The pollution hotline provides the ability to pass on other matters to other organisations as well, so we tend to get issues that we can pass on to TAs quite quickly. And it demonstrates that the regulator is responsive and active, and we respond to issues of poor performance, so we're quite a visible service. And the outcomes we're trying to achieve is we stop environmental harm as quickly as possible. We build community trust and confidence in us as an environmental regulator. It provides consequences to send clear messages around resource use expectations. We work across individuals and sector levels to provide industry level guidance, and we gather intelligence with regard to resource use and general compliance.
Again, we have some known knowns. We know the number of complaints per year is relatively stable, with the exception of single large incidents, which occur occasionally. We know our current resourcing can deliver to the number of complaints based on our triaging and prioritisation. We know our after-hours incident response service does need reviewing, and it hasn't been reviewed for a while. Not sure what will come from that review. It does operate very well. Our community values the service. We know that. We are seeing an increase in complaints as a result of community tension. These complaints take more resource and time to resolve, and we're seeing those increase. And while we're not seeing numbers increase, we are seeing the complexity. And I think what we are seeing in society in general complicate resolution. We also find ourselves with communities expecting us to referee and resolve, which is difficult as well. And we have some known unknowns. Again, local government reform, final versions of RMA reform. We're not sure how much change will be required to our service. And again, we have the effect of this uncertainty on our workforce. We don't think these external changes are likely to have much impact on the service, perhaps with the exception of the potential for centralisation, and we really have very little sight of that. So where you were last time we had this conversation was to continue responding to reports of environmental harm and resolving them. Our assumption has stayed the same. We'll continue to receive 3,500 to 4,000 reports a year, and the indication from Council was to hold steady on this service. So to summarise, this is a demand-driven service, like authorisations. So it is highly valued by our community and highly visible. Complaints are relatively stable year on year, and we have a good triage service that delivers well. We don't see there will be a lot of impact from RMA reform. Centralisation has a potential for a huge impact, but presently we don't really have much sight of that. And we're seeing no changes really required.
Great, thank you. So again, we have 15 minutes for discussion. So we're going to, so far we only have two councillors. That's Councillor Campbell and Councillor Claire Mackay. Okay, so Councillor Robinson, but we'll go with Councillor Campbell first and Councillor Claire Mackay.
Okie dokie. My comment, question, observation. First of all, I think the hold steady is the right place to be. But my comment, question, observation is that the community gets grumbly about no after hours response. going by the general East Christchurch Facebook vibe, this is what gets them most grumbly. And I understand that probably the health and safety is going to unknown places after dark, not knowing what you're going to. I get that. But I'm wondering whether we can look, I mean, when people are reporting 5 smoky chimneys and one, are there things that we can do to perhaps prioritise that there are some after hours incidents that we can respond to if it doesn't require going on to a property type thing, and the others that we leave until it's light and a bit safer?
Yes, absolutely. And response is an all-encompassing word. Response may be a phone call, and that may be all that's required. So this is a part of the review that I'd like to undertake of the service. I think, yes, we do need to manage the health and safety of our people, and that's number one, without doubt. But I think we can get quite nuanced in what response means and triage a bit better than we are.
Thank you. I actually had one question for this as well, and because it's directly related to what Councillor Campbell said, I'm going to ask mine now rather than later. I'm so sorry. Apologies, people.
You might be asking more.
Okay, so my question is, does the hold steady that we directed last time enable the review to occur and improve that service?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on that topic?
That was my question, so.
Okay, Councillor Robinson had some comment on that particular one, so we'll jump to you first then.
Mine's a commentary on that as well, because I think there's certain criteria that needs to be met in some incidents that the nuance element is essential, so long as we've got support in that. And just for an example, like if there's a beached whale that needs responding to, the Department of Conservation's natural instinct, and rightly so, is to not attend in the dark for health and safety. But in the incident where there's adequate attendees that are highly trained, then maybe. But if it's the public, it's otherwise. And I think there needs to be some sort of element that sits outside the scope, but it's very descriptive. And I'm wondering if you know what that might be. Like fire service with police is perfect, but if you separate them, sometimes it doesn't work. Depending on what it is, I'm wondering what that scope might be to help. Make sense? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think I can answer the question what that scope would look like, but definitely we need to build one, and that is, I think, getting more nuanced than no response after dark. The one I can think of is where we've got emergency services. Our health and safety is probably quite well managed, and we would fall under their health and safety management system, so we should respond if necessary. The opposite end of the scale, walking onto private property to put out a fire where a barbecue is raging, perhaps we don't want to be there after dark. Yeah.
Right. Councillor Lamont, was your question on this topic, or were you just adding to the list? It is. Go for gold.
Indeed, it is adding to your question.
Okay, great.
And it's about this topic, but it applies to all topics. Is it your normal business practice to be looking at agility in terms of reducing costs? We said hold steady leaves the ability to be agile within that, to pull back. Is that just business as usual all the time for everywhere all at once?
I'll answer that by saying it should be, yes. We should be building continuously improving and having continuous improvement systems. We do in some areas, and some areas we don't. We haven't reviewed the service for some time. Good business is continuous improvement.
Great, thank you. Back to the list, which is Councillor Claire Mackay next.
Comment. Given where the conversation's just gone, I wonder, incident response feels pretty urban, but I know it's not urban. So my concerns that I'd highlighted were also around how do we do the after our stuff, because it also lands on with me, the concern there. So I think that's really important. The question I have got is, are there opportunities, or are you looking at how we could rationalise, collaborate with TAs, because I understand they all have after hours incident responses or compliance responses. So are there opportunities there that we could actually work closely with our neighbours, just like a 24-hour after hours doctor or something like that?
Yeah, I think all those opportunities are on the table to collaborate with and work alongside and connect with TAs that also operate after an hour service. I think we also have the opportunity to outsource some stuff. There are organisations that do this very well. There are council-controlled organisations like CityCare that do a lot of this as well. Where it becomes a bit more problematic for us is the enforcement end of response. So definitely for reducing harm, not a problem. I think we can contract out and we can use others. Where we fall into the wanting to enforce off the back of an incident, there are ways of doing that, but it becomes more problematic.
Just a supplementary to that, you made the comment about how difficult some of this work is becoming, perhaps neighbours having arguments and things like that. Are you actually developing some sort of plan to try and say, well, this is our role done, this is civil now or whatever, and walking away, because otherwise these things can get quite drawn out and you get drawn into stuff that is far beyond where your role's finished or our role's finished.
Yeah, I think there's a few components to this. Yes, although full and final responses may not be full and final. There's, we're a public organisation and we serve our community, and it is a very tricky situation to get into, to say what is important to you is no longer important to us. And so we need to be very careful how we do that and some structure around it. I think it comes down to how we behave, how we listen, how we treat people. The better we get at that, the better we will be able to resolve things too, I think, and that is an ongoing work on for us.
Great, thank you. Councillor Davis and then Councillor Moody.
I'm thinking of an example that it involved the TA as well. And there was a lot of time spent, but until I actually had to do a hell of a lot of connecting with that people. I mean, I'm talking all through the organization. It took a lot of time. So how do we, and this is Claire's point, how, because I put a lot of snaps and solves in, and I know that we're one of the best. So if we kind of tried to walk away from this, I'm actually wondering what that does to our staff. So the staff on the ground who does incident response, do they do other things in this organization? Like, would they be out of a job if we didn't do it?
We do marry quite seamlessly incident response with the compliance monitoring. So we may have incident response officers, that's all they do. But we also say, hey, there's consents monitored, so that not necessarily we didn't do that work, that there wouldn't be other work to do. I hope, does that answer the question? Do you want me to comment on the first part, or?
Well, there's a piece there.
I think what Brett's alluding to in the review, I think there are times where our response is one part of a number of organisations. You think about Bromley, it wasn't just us, it was also the Christchurch City Council and Health. And sometimes that becomes a little bit complex as to who is the lead and what elements need to be led first. And that takes a whole lot of extra coordination. And maybe that's not necessarily, we go into those incidents with that fully firm view, and that sometimes takes some time to figure out. I think we could get better at that, but I don't think it's just ECAN getting better at it. I think other organisations could improve too.
And I think this is the challenge of having very passionate staff. who want to do a very good job, is trying to stay within our lane when there are other organisations that aren't potentially there. And again, it's something we need to work on.
Right, Councillor Moody.
So I did this job as an incident response officer and after hours on call, and worked alongside them for 6 years, and also did a lot of calling up as a public before I worked for ECAN, for years. So I'll try to keep it brief. It is definitely something that's very valued by the community, and we get approached as councillors if they're not getting resolution. So I think the key outcome it delivers is that it's something the community wants. They can call us and someone goes out. The actual outcome in terms of environmental compliance with our rules and a good, healthy environment isn't very good, from this. And I think that the next piece we're coming to around the better funding of CME, new models, is really what moves the dial, actually, because, we only have, at least 3 years ago, 2 or 3 officers for the 500,000 people in Christchurch. You maybe have 7 places to go a day, an hour each one. You're rushing around. And so the ability to actually resolve a problem is pretty limited. It's very triaged. And I find, certainly working with fishing clubs, and fishermen, that it builds community trust and confidence. It erodes community trust and confidence in us as an environmental regulator. The main feedback I would get would be, I called ECAN, they came out a few times, nothing got done, of course. And I would say, yeah, well, do you want to pay more rates and have a better service and more time on the ground? Because if it's a simple thing like, hey, there's rubbish dumped on the side of the road, yeah, we can solve it. It's gone. Or if someone's burning rubbish in the backyard, we can stop that fire. But most of the things that come in actually require more time invested in it, a preventative approach, a proactive approach. Like I would always ring up, there's dirt going in the river. The river's full of dirt, it's all muddy. And besides the time an officer gets there, including me, unless they're Superman, the dirt's gone.
So Councillor Moody, can I just
that's pretty much it.
Because our regional delivery, which talked about the performance of ECAN, occurred yesterday in that committee meeting. Today is potentially not about defending those service performance measures, because that's what the regional delivery does. So the question for today is whether there's any gaps in what the staff have presented to us as being, if we hold steady right now, which is what we asked for last time, this is what hold steady looks like. And do we agree with that direction?
Yeah, and I do. And I think that what we need to put our energies into is that review of funding in the next piece, for the reasons I've outlined. This is important for community, but it doesn't currently solve the outcomes that we'd like to see solved because we haven't got the resource.
Right. Well, those issues can be raised at regional delivery, and perhaps have a conversation with Councillor Sunkel around that.
Don't need to raise them. No. Just you wanted views, not questions. So that was my view. Yeah, keep it steady.
Right. Keep going go well. What you've presented is good. And then Councillor Faulkner, and then we are out of time.
Okay, I'll try and be quick too. When you were talking about the community angst that's out there, and I think to Bromley, a number of incidents came in there, and I'm trying to keep it at a rather high level. And then the Kaiapoi smoke, that was one. And then I also think about Bainans Road, that was a bit of they were touching on that space. Then I'm also thinking, okay, we got the nitrate emergency. Have we got a determination level of harm, a drafting gate process where things just get bing, 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 bing quickly?
Yes, Councillor. So that is our triage and our prioritisation. And so you could imagine that if it was a discharge to a water body, we'd be, that would be straight there. And then from there we work down. So we do that. I think what you're saying is we can't provide the instant response to all of those complaints, but that's not possible. We, on average, get around 4,000 complaints. There's no other regional council that's anywhere near that level of reporting. We are so it can only work with triaging and prioritisation. If we were to try and respond to everyone, we would need an army of people to be out and about.
I think there's also so when we get the complaint, we triage, and we triage on the information we have, and then we'll attend the complaint, and we'll triage again on what we've found. Where we do get caught, and I think this is where your point is heading, is it can be difficult to assess the degree of community angst around an issue, and that can catch us. Where we are looking through a technical environmental effect and we miss the community part, which can be difficult to assess, but also can come on very quickly.
Great, thank you. And we are out of time, so anyone who had any other questions, then note them down. We might come back to them later today. So we're now at the compliance, slide 32, and we have until 11:15 to start, 11:45 to work through to this, and then we will break until 12:30. That's what the time frame is. Yep. Yes. Well, actually, I'll ask staff and councillors if we choose to go until 12 o'clock. That does mean you will have a colder lunch.
Just through the chair, just the end of this compliance, if we can get through that.
Well, that's going to take probably about an hour or longer. Okay. It's quite a long session, this one. This is
stick to the program. Come back early.
What we can do is do the LTP bit and stop when we get to the revenue model, which is halfway through the compliance part.
If that's sensible, that sounds really good. Great. Thank you.
It's a cold lunch.
It's a cold lunch, so don't worry.
You can keep going until it's a natural stop.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Okay, this is the compliance monitoring and enforcement service called compliance. And really this is about monitoring compliance and resolving non-compliance of priority properties and undertaking enforcement for serious offending. It also includes account management, includes management of large-scale complex regulatory customers. In this service, we also have our water and land function, which is providing advice and education to help landowners and community understand obligations and broader environmental outcomes, and our biosecurity compliance. But water and land and biosecurity will come to a future conversation. Today we are just talking about RMA compliance monitoring and enforcement.
So, councillors, the purpose of Resource Management Act compliance monitoring and enforcement, resource users are responsible for complying with any rules, regulation and consent conditions. And we have two broad purposes: is to monitor resource consents, to find issues and fix them, and to provide assurance that the regulatory system is working. The work stream in the service, there's four main work streams. Compliance monitoring is we think is broken down into four sort of parts. We reactively respond to complaints and intelligence about poor practice. We assess risk of activities and proactively monitor compliance of those activities. We monitor activities by sampling large populations to gain compliance assurance to obtain statistical significance. And we design, develop and implement collaborative harm reduction programs focused on place and or issue. We also have investigations and enforcement. We take action on ongoing non-compliance or environmental offending and use directive or punitive enforcement as necessary. We also, and it's a more recent thing, provide account management, providing one-on-one management for large-scale complex regulatory customers. And we've had conversations with no shortage of complex consents that we need to work with. And we also do water data administration stuff, services as well. So we receive water data via telemetry and monitor water use.
I'd just like to make a point in here. Points 3 and 4, we do very, very lightly. And this is where we are constrained by our revenue model. So 1 and 2, we do very well. 3 and 4, we struggle to get into just because of our drive to recover revenue.
Sorry, in a similar vein to the authorisations and the incident response, we do other stuff as well in compliance monitoring enforcement. We do financial administration services. We make sure we provide regulatory intelligence, data analysis, informing prioritisation and understanding risk of compliance risk. We do administration and reporting. So we do development of dashboards and we report to central government on a number of matters. We also try to do as much quality assurance as possible in terms of business and process improvements. And obviously, as you'd appreciate, lots of training for staff and support. And then also we do strategic and national contributions, again, working with central government and other authorities. That's me. Okay, and so the outcomes we're seeking to deliver at the highest level, we affect long-term voluntary compliance through the use of our full suite of tools, from education to enforcement. And you'll have heard Brett say this a number of times, using the right tool at the right time to the best effect. We understand compliance risks across the region and prioritise our monitoring effort to where we'll have the most impact. We reduce compliance risk by working with resource users to take necessary steps to resolve identified non-compliance. Serious and repeat offenders who fail to comply face consequences through enforcement actions. And we attempt to give confidence to council and customers and the community that the rules, regulations and consent conditions are being complied with and environmental harm is minimised as a result. Oh, sorry. Just looking at my notes that go through. And so the financial aspect of this, the total cost to the compliance services agreed in the annual plan is 27.8 million. And as Brett says, that number encompasses the water and land and biosecurity compliance component. But if you're looking just at the compliance monitoring enforcement portion, that's 15 million.
Okay. So we have, again, some known knowns. We know the resource management system aims to strengthen the role of compliance monitoring and enforcement as a system, and that's not unexpected as authorisation becomes potentially more permissive. So there'll be an expectation that compliance becomes more critical. We know there's an intended shift in emphasis in the system from consent processing to monitoring compliance with national standards, rules and consents. More activities we know are expected to be classed as permitted, so there is an expectation that greater monitoring of permitted activities will be required. This will be something we will need to discuss in the future, as we do not recover from permitted activities, only from consented activities at the moment. New powers and provisions will strengthen compliance monitoring enforcement tools within the new system. Some have already been introduced via the RMA. Further changes are anticipated. And we know we need a big shift to become a smart and enabling regulator. As more expectation falls upon the compliance end and away from authorisations, that shift will become more critical. And we know our current revenue recovery model is a barrier to some of these big shifts. And we have some unknown knowns, which are not too much different to the other two functions. We don't know the final form of local government reform. Similarly, for RMA reform, we don't know how much change will be required to our services. We don't know the effect of the uncertainty on our workforce again, and I think that will become a more of a factor as we travel this journey. We know government is considering two options for the future delivery of compliance monitoring enforcement functions. There's a move to new unitary authorities and potentially a centralisation to a national body with regional hubs. We don't have any sight of the detail of that at the moment. So they will be the big changes that we just can't see. We don't think, in many respects, those external changes are likely to have much impact on our service as we run it, with the exception of the potential centralisation. So as with our consenting or authorisation or consenting function, we do have an ambition to become a smart and enabling regulator. The vision and associated work program is very tied to driving some big shifts in our regulatory services to be place-based, and we use this term, it's a bit bigger than a geospatial place, but we want to, I think at its heart it is about being community-centric. That may be around place, that may be around issue, but very much wanting to involve community at the centre of how we regulate. We want to be driven by risk and outcomes. So we want to have a very clear view of where risk sits in the system and the degree of that risk. And we want to apply our tools and our craft with outcomes at our forefront of our mind. We want to deliver in partnership. We need to understand that we are one organisation amongst many with very similar outcomes. Our communities actually want very similar outcomes. The more we can engage and work in partnership, the more chance we have of delivering those outcomes. And we want to work in a way where we enhance the mana of this organisation, of our people, and all those we interact with. And that is behavioural. And that is, at its heart, that is the delivery of the regulatory craft. And it is a craft. And it has people at its heart, and how we interact and behave and treat people will either build mana of this organisation and those we interact with or not, and is a huge focus for us. And again, achieving the vision requires changes and improvements across platforms, process, policy and people. We are working on the water compliance data platform, which will allow us to, gave you a presentation a week or so ago, will allow us to really start to get to the heart of water compliance with the large data sets that we receive. And we need to work on building how we receive, store and access other data and manage our workflows. Many ways this slide is a repeat of the other one. It's again repeating, deploy to risk, increasing automation. With a large number of consents and data we gain, our ambition is to use automation much more to gain assurance across these big data sets and target us to risk. We want to use the right tool at the right time. We have a full suite from education through to enforcement, and we need to make sure we're using the right tool for the right outcome. We want to connect and coordinate across this organisation and our partners and use all levers for change, and that is at the heart of place-based, and you'll hear that come through the land and water presentations and ideally our biosecurity presentations, but it's about being community-centric and again outcome-focused.
And that's the pause. We're now into what to do.
Yeah, so we can pause here.
Yes, so after lunch, we will be going through the revenue model, and that's quite a lot of slides. And then on slide 61, that's where we look at what we said last time, which was a split between reduce and improve. So what we might do after lunch, if it's fine with you, it might make sense that if people have some questions on that first part of that presentation, so questions, but also any gap assessments that they might have done on the assumptions, on the knowns and unknowns, that we spend a few minutes on that before we move into the rest of the presentation and then the overall discussion, if you're comfortable with that. Okay, so that means that we're coming back at 12:30 for lunch, and because if we start the next slide now, we're going to get stuck. We could ask one or two questions for this, but we're being mindful that the time in the diary is not just about councillors' time, it's also about staff time. So we haven't organised to have a change of time. So Councillor Robinson and then Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor Mackenzie could go first if you need that, Councillor Robinson.
I've written down all my questions, but not aligned to pages as such. But it's about sort of risk-based assurance. Have we covered that? Oh my god.
We're in the first part of the slide, so up to slide
41, isn't it?
We're up to 43 is what we're up to.
Yeah. Sorry.
Well, Councillor Mackenzie, why don't you start with your question, and then Councillor Robinson, we can come back.
Okay, thank you, Megan. Compliance of consents depends on the complexity of the consent conditions. And so it seems to me that if we're looking to have an efficient compliance regime, we need to have better settings or a more efficient regime around consent conditions. And I think this afternoon we might be discussing a potential consent with, what did you say, 27 pages of consent conditions. You know, that's a nightmare for anybody or anywhere. And I see the Fertiliser Association are complaining about some of the consent conditions in Northland Regional Council, where they have to monitor wind conditions at 30 metres in the air, which is, you know, there are some stupidities which goes on. So I guess in terms of getting an efficiency in compliance monitoring, how are we addressing the consent conditions or the rules and regulations that those consent conditions rely on?
If we cast our minds back to the authorisation part of this presentation, we have a desire. This is about balancing risk with regulatory burden, and getting a very keen view of what are the critical risks and what do we need to manage via conditions. That's one part of it. The second part is, and we are starting to do this now, and I think we've started with, I want to say construction phase stormwater for subdivisions, and we'll be moving into gravels, is to work with the industry with our suite of standard conditions, to sit down with them and go, look, this is the outcome we're trying to achieve through this condition. Is there a way that we can recraft this condition where it makes sense on the ground? And I think, we have an obligation to draft conditions that meet some tests. They need to be legal and enforceable and a few other things. But if they don't make sense on the ground, then we are not achieving the outcomes we want. So we are doing some work in that space.
I mean, the other critical side to that, just with your indulgence, Madam Chair, is that when they don't make sense, that's where you get the conflict with the consent holder, with the compliance officers.
Great. We have checked in with staff, and staff are all available to go through until 12 o'clock. So we'll do that, and then we'll break from 12 until 12:30. But we'll still focus these questions for now up until slide 43. So Councillor Moody, then Councillor Faulkner. Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you for that. It's probably more of a crystal ball type gazing. Looking at the on the page 41, the options for compliance and monitoring, and looking at the unitaries, and part of the conversation before was complex consents. Do you see in the future that the complex consents could be separated out from the less complex consents, flicked into the new unitary authority, and the complex ones are kept as a core service?
I definitely think we can start to triage consents on complexity, without doubt. And I think we've talked of having different paths that are placing increasing burden on increasing risk. And I think the second part of your question was whether it could be split out of a complexity, be split over unit. That's I don't know, and I don't think any of us can see that.
Just in addition, what we're predicting on the less complex consent or consent conditions, there's a huge there's a potential of automation that we'll do, and we discussed that with water data as one example, where there's up to 2,500 consents that could be, because of we understand the complexity and the risk, that is an opportunity to automize that significantly. So, and then what that does in turn is allows our human beings to focus on the more complicated stuff. So we're seeing that happen at the moment.
Councillor Claire Mackay, then Councillor Gerard.
Look, I like what I heard from you, Brett, really around that becoming a smart enabling regulator and what it looks like, and your comments around enhancing the manner of the organisation and the people, because I think the culture and the way of working has certainly been a point of tension, and I think that we definitely need to work with people, and we've been trying to do that. I know latterly in my couple of trienniums of council here, to work with people you get far better outcomes. They respond far better than us going in and wielding a big stick in the badge, so to speak. So really important there. What I would ask, and it may be more appropriate in the next section, but I will ask it here as well, is that we currently have some collectives, particularly our irrigation companies, that have responsibilities in a compliance space, and I think there's probably something like 1,500, let's say 1,500 people that, if we actually made them get their own individual consent, have we worked out the benefits of the organisation for that? Because I know when we started doing these sort of global consents, there was some quite good information put on the table about the benefits to us. Have you thought about that, or are you looking at that when you're thinking about this next new part about the revenue modelling? Because I think that we need to acknowledge those benefits of the fact that somebody else has a global consent. They have an environmental management reporting system on an annual basis with you. Account managers, as I understand it, are already in place, or people in place to supervise them. I'm just wary that in trying to be a super smart enabling regulator, that we might have two bites of the cherry sometimes, and we need to be aware of that.
I think it's a really good question. I think we understand the benefits of those types of arrangements because, as you've alluded to, if there wasn't the irrigation schemes, there'd be thousands of more consents. So that just instantly is a much better platform. And then the ability to work directly with those organisations around sharing of information and data, so having compliance assurance is so much more improved and more streamlined. Whether we talk about it enough, probably for further debate. There's a second part of your question. Do we think about what that looks like in terms of the discussion after lunch? Yeah, maybe we have that discussion after lunch. Yeah, I think it's a good point.
I think that is exactly where we need to be. We actually don't do anything out there in the real world. We gain assurance. That's what we do. We do ask people to fix things, sometimes with the use of coercive power, but in reality, others do stuff. And the more we can leverage and empower others to do the right stuff and sit at an assurance level, the greater scope we will get across activities, the more buy-in we will get. That is at its heart it's a trust as an organisation. We need to start to trust as a regulatory agency with appropriate checks and balances. And we talked in the past, I know, about audited self-management, and I think that is key. That is not self-management without audit. And so our role is to provide the appropriate checks and balances across the top.
Can I just add, I'm going to use my lead here. Sorry. Sure. It is a little bit, well, we'll have to wait till we start to have the land and water compliance, that discussion, because I think people have even today have just asked me about when we're having that integrated catchment discussion and how we might fund that, because I think the team of people that we've set up within that group, they can work in that manner. They've got a rapport and a culture, and they've been very, very positive. So, and they do a lot of compliance work as well. So I think that just to watch the space, councillors, because I think that when we get to that discussion, we need to tie it in with how we work here.
Great, thank you. And that was a really helpful answer to put it into a different lens, Brett, by saying we're not the doers. It's not the lens that I had applied. So reframing sometimes helps you view it slightly differently. So thank you for that answer. Councillor Gerard, and then Deputy Chair Cranwell.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a question around both incident response and compliance and enforcement. So say there was a significant event of pollution from an industrial plant, and there was ongoing community reporting, and it went on for quite some time, and it was quite a cost to us. Could there be a cost recovery situation there where you could allocate that time of dealing with all the community issues and put it back onto the enforcement?
So currently we can recover actual and reasonable costs now. And so that's really reasonably well defined. So if there is an incident that continues, we generally can recover most of those costs. It's usually staff time. When we take it further and go into enforcement, that's when the costs start to halt because we're taking enforcement action. So there's a point where we can't recover until the court's decided, and that usually results in a court awarded fine or something like that. Sometimes when that happens, our costs are not always completely met. So we might spend more in legal and procedural costs than the court's award. But generally, we can recover most of our costs. But it doesn't always follow that way, because if you think about an officer that might be moving into a really complex consenting situation, they might need to spend 3 or 4 hours reading up on that. That's not stuff that can be easily recovered.
And I just want to clarify, so that question that's talking about pollution or a incident, but in this section we're talking about compliance. So we're talking about an incident that's caused a breach of compliance. Is that the frame of your answer?
Yeah. Yeah, we still can, if an incident led and it was part of a consent, we'd still be able to recover those costs, yeah.
Great. Sometimes it's really helpful to go, this is about incident response and this is about compliance and enforcement and what the difference is. So helpful. So did you have a follow-up question, Councillor Gerard?
It was really a combination of that, because an incident, you get all these, say the acid plant started, very dangerous gas, and this was sulfur dioxide. And people started reporting and getting sick, and dogs were, vomiting and things like that. So, what, it's really the cost of having to deal with those community issues. Can that be then charged to the? So it's a combination of dealing with an incident.
So in framing your answer, step one, how it relates to compliance would be helpful, because first of all, it has to be a compliance matter, and then how we charge for compliance enforcement. That frame might be helpful.
Yeah, so framing it in compliance. So incident response could be for an unconsented activity or could be for a consented activity. Where it's a consented activity, we can recover costs through our policies, action reasonable costs. Where it's not a consented activity, it becomes a little more difficult. we can always invoice for costs, and probably it gets paid on the good character of the person we invoice for. We do have the ability to go to court and ask for enforcement orders, which can also ask for costs. We can issue infringement notices, which will fine. It's not really a cost recovery mechanism, but it's a punitive measure where the monies do come back to us, or we could prosecute, where a court will impose a fine. And as Paul said, very rarely do we get back the costs that we've spent going to court. But sometimes it's important to provide that consequence.
Thank you. And final question for lunch is Deputy Chair Cranwell.
Yeah.
You turned it off. 36, slide 36, Koro. 3 and 4, you just mentioned before, time, activity in that area. I mean, to concentrate on that area and to put more service into it, would it create more employment or EFTs, or to actually do that 100%? What would be the outcome?
I think I understand the question. So in 3 and 4, are you asking how we fund that?
You kind of briefly when you went through it, you said, 3 and 4, we're not, it was probably not we're not really delivering on, or that's what I took from it. Yeah.
So at the moment, our revenue recovery model, we can only charge actionable and reasonable, and that is per consent, time we spend monitoring a consent. So we're very transactionally focused one-to-one on consented activities. What 3 and 4? 3 still allows us to do that, but with 28,000 consents, what we need to be doing is grouping activities and randomly at some statistical level sampling the population and doing monitoring and it will give us some view of, okay, they're fine, or actually we've got some compliance issues in here and we need to dive deeper. The last one, 4, is really around where Councillor Mackay's view was, and that is designing harm reduction programs, and that is getting, for want of a better term, the system in the room to figure out who plays what role to deal with the issues that we've got at hand. Less about ECAN leading everything out, more about ECAN facilitating that conversation and holding parties to account for what they're obliged to deliver. That is, we can't charge for that at the moment, and so it becomes problematic for us to step into that space. We don't gather our revenue.
Great, thank you. Look, before we break for lunch, I just wanted to make it clear that there's still some councillors who have question or discussion points on those slides. When we come back from lunch, we'll continue this section, then we'll move on to the financing part. Also encourage councillors that in the final discussion part of today, when we are talking about this topic, I wanted just to take everybody's mind back to the 11th of June. And this is one of those areas where it was quite split. So in terms of, we got 6 saying improve the service, we got 7 saying reduce the service, and we got 2 in the middle. So it would be really helpful for staff to get some clearer direction from us today on this one in particular, since it was so split at the time. So we'll break now, we'll come back, and then we'll come to those councillors' questions and then continue on. So thank you so much. See everyone at 12:30. Okay, so welcome back, everybody, to the afternoon session. We were moving on to, well, before we move on to compliance service revenue model, we had 3 questions from the session before that we will come to. So that is Councillor Davis, then Councillor Robinson, and then Councillor Campbell are the 3 who still have remaining questions or discussion points.
Thank you. Slide number 19 again. My question is about getting SIR, Smart Enabling Regulator, going, because I see that as a way we are going to save money. Slide number, 39. What am I talking about? It's because I didn't have my glasses on. Yeah, that one. So, and my question was sort of around, are we pulling money out of this to get SIR going? But why don't you guys just, 2 things. I really want to get it going. I see that as a huge priority for us. So A, we can save money, and B, we can just be better. So when's it coming, and what do you need to get it going?
It's underway, and it's. I think we will need money for platforms, to build a couple of platforms. We have not got a good estimate of that right now. A lot of SIR is cultural change, and that doesn't need a lot of money. It needs time and focus, and I think we can do that without asking for any more resource. As we get through into the next part of the session, which is talking about a revenue model, I think there are some opportunities in there, and we're just not sure how much more we need in this space. If it's all predicated upon where you land on the revenue model, it's predicated upon the work we're doing within the organisation around prioritisation and what may need to stop. So it's all in the mix right now.
Estimated. Do you think we'd have it in a year?
There'll be elements that can be delivered within a year for sure, and you'll see as previous sort of updates to let's talk about the platform pieces, the water data automation in the next year or just a bit longer, and that's a core project of SIR. So yes, you'll start to see automation. What that means is we might need to pay for that automation, and that's still an unknown cost. But what that means is staff can be reprioritized so that you start to see those benefits. And as Brett says, some of the non-platform, the process and people stuff, that will probably over a longer period of time. But you'll start to see benefits reasonably quickly.
I think at the heart of your question too is, and this is something we need to turn our minds to, is how do we measure the benefits? How will we measure progress? And that's on me and my team to develop some measures and indicators that we can come back to you regularly and show, hey, we're making movement.
Great. Councillor Robinson and then Councillor Campbell.
No, thank you. It sort of feeds into pre-lunch risk discussions. So with regards to the risk-based monitoring assurance that we could be moving into, because it's something that we haven't done necessarily in large scale before, who would determine the risk, do the priority areas and the risk-based assessments, and what would that criteria look like?
So those would be it's determined now. So with 28,000 consents, we are making risk-based decisions on what we go and look at. Now, what I'm suggesting is there are potentially large parts of that 28,000 that we're not looking across. We've categorised them as low risk, and we need to do some sampling to go, is our categorisation correct? So I guess what I'm talking about is assurance that what we are doing is pointing out and deploying our resources in the right space. But we definitely have criteria, and we can come back and at some stage in the future give you a briefing on that.
So back to slide 40, and this was something that you touched on, that more activities expected to be classed as permitted and greater monitoring, and we don't currently have a way to recover any of those costs. That's clearly an issue that we have to look at for what's coming at us. Even though we don't have anything at the moment, are there any thoughts in your head of what we can do about that and what resources that might require, so that monitoring permitted activities doesn't drain our coffers?
That's a really good question. I think that when we monitor permitted activity, it's usually because of the incident related. Something's gone wrong, or you've not got a consent, you should have followed this rule and you didn't. And then there is an ability to recover some of those costs because, we now enter into an enforcement or a punitive conversation. So it's not entirely true to say because some of that could be recovered. But if we're proactively monitoring permitted activities, well, we first need to know where they are, in order to have. So that's where it becomes more challenging. The council has got a broad workforce, and as we've alluded to, we're not talking about land and water today. But within that compliance, is there a role for land and water to help with some of those permitted activity monitorings where we don't recover costs, but we provide advice and support? So I think we need to keep working on it, and I'm not entirely sure the picture's that clear for us to give you a firm answer, but it's certainly front of mind because we have to be able to pay for or recover the services. And if permitted activities increase and there's an expectation that we're supposed to monitor them, and then there would need to be some sort of recovery.
So just a quick supplementary to that. Do you think, or is it likely that sorting out how we do that is going to require extra resourcing in the next couple of years in a way that might play into the long-term plan?
I'm not sure because if, say, some of that permitted activity monitoring is moved into farm environment planning, say, for example, we've got provision, we do that already through our audited system. So maybe not, but if there's more permitted activities outside of established auditing processes, then perhaps they'll need more resource, or it becomes a discussion of prioritization. Do we stop doing something in order to focus on that increased workflow? So I know I'm not being entirely clear, but it's still a bit unclear at this stage.
Right.
I think we can build process within current resources. That won't be a problem. Should we need to build a platform to capture permitted activities on, that may take some resource. But I think until we see the final form of the RMA reform and the national instruments that will start to permit, we don't know.
I just have one final question from me, and it's about whether or not there is a gap in the unknowns, but it relates to slide 36. The indication that you gave to us earlier, Brett, that 3 and 4 we do some of, but not lots of. And so my question is, if we're not doing lots of the sampling large populations work, then as we're doing it, doesn't that become an unknown as well, because we don't know what we're going to discover? So we don't know how big the issues truly are?
Yes, it does. I think you're right. And that will the extent of the unknown will depend on how accurate our risk categorisation criteria is working at the moment. That'll be quite a good test.
Okay, great. Thank you. Councillor Mackay has something.
Yeah, no, added on to that, though, surely we have some perception of the risks, because people must be telling us what's out there in that large population that we see. currently is lower risk.
Yeah, and the risk operates at a number of levels. So there's an inherent risk of the activity. So an on-site wastewater treatment plant is inherently not particularly risky. It's one, but the cumulative effect of a subdivision becomes more risky. Similarly, a large industrial plant is inherently got quite some risk, and then that's overlain by dynamic risk, which is a large industrial plant, extremely well operated, may be low risk, but a subdivision with very little oversight may come up in risk. So it's a very nuanced way that we need to look at the world.
And therein lies the problem of how you actually sheet those back to individuals or businesses.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay, so let's move into the next session. So that's from slide. So we're up to slide 44 onwards.
Okay, before we get into it, I should introduce Shannon Bennett, who's our finance manager. Shannon is at the table with us because Paul and I are going to start to transition into some financial discussions. And we need someone who knows what they're talking about at the table with us.
That's pretty free and frank.
Okay, so we've got a big rock. It's a barrier. We have talked about it. The current model for recovering revenue and compliance is primarily the recovery of costs from users via time and materials, with the exception of a fixed charge for water takes for the collection verification of water use data and a fixed charge for bore installations. Everything else is materials and time. And this means the bulk of user pays revenue is gathered via the hourly charge delivered from chargeable time spent monitoring resource consents. And I've talked about the fact that it drives us into a one-to-one transactional compliance monitoring regime. And the model has a significant number of consequences, including being a significant blocker to the shifts and improvements that we have discussed around our ambition to be a smart and enabling regulator. Risk-based, prioritised, outcome-driven. So, as previously discussed, the big shift to being a smart and enabling regulator is predicated upon the changes to our revenue model. And there is a purpose within this section above an LT, just a deep dive, and that purpose, and I'd ask you to keep this forefront in your mind as we go through this, is to seek council agreement to progress through to the development of options for a new compliance revenue model that we would propose through the long-term plan. And the issue does sit within a wider revenue and financing context, and that's why we've got Shannon at the table. And that is the explicit central government expectations of increased user pays revenue and local government legislative reform. This slide is just pictorial, really, around the current context. Our existing revenue model, it does constrain key improvements. We need to build an agile and future-ready regulatory system. We need to improve their regulatory system processes to become risk-based, increasingly automated, digitally enabled, and people-centric. And to do this, we really need to review and establish a new regulatory revenue model.
So you'll know this well. Consents and compliance services are funded through a mix of user pays and general rates, as discussed. The current revenue and financing policy sets a user proportion between 60 and 80%. And our user pay are enabled by certain acts within the RMA to recover reasonable costs, and we've had that discussion earlier on. Both user pays, general rates ratio and the user pays revenue have an impact on service delivery, and that will become apparent through this conversation. Consent holder experience and achievability of budget of targets and revenue policy. So the way which compliance is funded has an impact on how we work, and that will become clear as we go forward. Our current approach is that at present we recover all of our user pays charges through direct charging of time and materials. This means, and we start with an empty budget, and at the beginning of the year we have to fill it up by our charges and recoveries. And so the proposal for you to consider is a change from a move of recovery of user pays monitoring charges to an annual fixed fee for consent holders, but also retaining a degree of hourly charges for ongoing non-compliance. And again, that will be another. We'll be able to have that discussion as we move forward today.
Okay, so as Paul has just set out, the current model, under the current model, the user pays component of annual revenue begins at a very low level. So we're starting the year with an empty budget. And it means the collection of revenue becomes an important operating metric and driver of performance alongside other measures. And when you start to talk about targeting to risk and outcomes, a revenue gathering metric in that environment becomes a tension and a difficult tension to balance. It has a number of consequences for service delivery and for consent holders, and that includes it incentivises a monitoring focus on volume rather than risk and outcomes. It creates inequalities in consent holder costs. If you get monitored during the year, then you will pay. If you don't see us, you won't pay. And if you combine that with an incentivised focus on volume, we are driven to do the similar consents year on year on year. It provides a lack of predictability in timing and scale of costs for consent holders and businesses. So a business trying to budget for a year, not knowing whether they're going to get a compliance monitoring cost, and suddenly getting one. We don't announce a year in advance. We don't announce within budgetary cycles. That is a cost that comes on to businesses. It constrains continuous improvement and the ability to be smart and enabling regulator. Even to the conversations we have on site, when our officers are knowing that they're on the clock, our consent holders know they're on the clock, the ability to have a good in-depth conversation around how to be better, how to start to move towards best practice, how to remain within compliance becomes problematic. And it comes with high administration costs. So there is a high number of invoices that go out every year, some of them quite small, some of them quite large. They all attract the ability to appeal, and there is an increasing number of appeals that come through for our costs. So and the administration behind that and support those appeals is quite high. So this is our funding policy context. Our current policy talks about 60 to 80% user pays, which covers direct and indirect costs, and 20 to 40% general rates. We are currently budgeted compliant, but in reality, which is the blue line, this is the reality of what we recover every year. We do have the ability to up the user pays component, but that is very focused revenue gathering priority put above risk and outcome. What we see here is still a balance in there, but that is about what we're achieving. So our viewers, we need to change our compliance. This is user pays model. I think it's a revenue recovery model. The issue is not user pays. It's the model we currently use to collect the revenue from users. The proposed change introduced a system of fixed charges combined with time and material cost, where fixed charges are not set, and for where there's ongoing non-compliance. So we would use a mixed model and would charge time and materials for ongoing non-compliance, as that is where the cost should lie. The fixed charges would be introduced via the council's fees and charges schedule, which is part of the LTP process, and we'd come back and have a much more detailed conversation with you on that. But this change will unlock our ability to be a modern risk-based regulator, enabling delivery of a compliance service that is focused on highest risk. It can deal with complexity and regional priorities and prevent non-compliance. It will improve predictability and consistency of costs for consent holders and transparency for ratepayers. It will improve equity and consent holder costs that better accounts for scale and complexity at a service level. It will provide capacity for engagement to better enable demonstration of compliance. And it will better account for reasonable costs of the consent management and compliance service in alignment with core funding principles and in compliance with our current revenue and financing policy. It will come with some consequences, as well as addressing the operation and financial policy issues outlined in the previous slide. We anticipate that a shift to a revenue model involving fixed charges will have a number of consequences as set out up here. And these include, there will be an increase in annual costs for most consent holders and a reduction for some. There will likely be a significant increase in annual costs for large, complex consent holders. We believe there will be improved service levels for large consent holders along with that increased cost through the potential introduction of account management service. We will see a disincentive to bank consents, and we may see an increase in surrendered consents. Simplified and standardised fixed fees will support automation and more investment back into our business to develop more efficient processes and lower transaction costs. And we will see potential significant general rate savings dependent on where this council decides to land.
So I think this is a really important slide because you're likely to ask us, what do others do? And so when we've done the research, almost all regional councils have an annual fixed administration charge. So we're not proposing something that is out of the ordinary. Many have the annual compliance management monitoring charge for common small-scale activities, as you'll see. A scale of annual compliance management monitoring charges by consent type for some, and so on and so forth. I think I'll let you read that. But one of the things that was through the research, if you were to put fixed fees on one side and hourly rates recovery on the other, we are on that side, and there's a whole lot of regional councils have moved towards this different model. So we are in that context, but behind other regional councils in the movement to fixed fees, or a combination of fixed fees and hourly charges. We're going to need to do a lot more work on this, but just to give you an idea of how we would determine fixed charges, there would be an annual consent administration charge for all consents, and then we would also have annual compliance monitoring charge based on compliance by service type or activity. And then fixed charges for compliance monitoring service, EC, receipt of a receipt of verification report or something like that, or components of all of the above. Plus, time and materials were no charge was set, and it's for non-compliance. So what we're trying to do is increase our tool or suites of charges that we can move to a more sophisticated or more modern way of recovering our costs. But we'll still need to do quite a bit of work on that between now and when we come back to you.
I think it also does talk a little bit to the point that Councillor Campbell was making earlier on. It allows us to provide incentive for ongoing non-compliance and increasing cost of dealing with a monitoring officer. So This sits within a wider revenue and financing context. As mentioned at the start, the proposed changes to the compliance service sit within a wider revenue and financing policy, and finance will be the team to lead a wider review of that policy, and the fees and charges schedule is part of that, of which this is a part. I'll hand over to Shannon.
In terms of the precedent, thank you. In terms of the precedent, it has already been set by our consenting function, and it's applied to the annual water data processing charges. So extending the fixed fees is essentially just a phase 2 for the organisation. The recommended change is to basically deal with the under recoveries and shift that burden to shift the burden away from the ratepayers, because what we're seeing is where we're not capturing that income or recovering that income, it is actually having to come out of general rates. So it is a move towards a more fair and transparent process, and it will help us with our recoveries as well, because if those fixed fees are visible to consent applicants, we are a lot more likely to actually be able to recover those from them. At the moment, we are seeing a significant debt write-off. We are implementing a process to address that, but as I said, if we can have transparent fees, it will reduce that write-off. In the last couple of years, we've seen the average of that write-off being about $200,000 a year, which is not an insignificant amount. Dealing with cost objections is time-consuming and expensive. So there's the administrative burden internally, and then there's the legal requirement when we do try and recover that. And these things can take years. So having a true cost structure will mitigate that. So these are our outcomes that we will be judging the effectiveness of it. I do think it is, some things will be achieved through just process improvement and automation, and other things will become realised as we start to really get into going after those bigger value items. So this is our analysis from the last year. These numbers have not been audited, I just want to preface it, but we had budgeted for essentially a break-even position. So there is a general rates component, so it was 5.3 was put in there, and the rest of it was supposed to be user pay, so $6 million. However, we've actually achieved a deficit position of 3.2 million or 3.3 million, which is a 42% variance. And that is the equivalent of about 1.75 general rates having to be used to recover that, because we haven't recovered that revenue.
Okay, so just to summarise this section, we do have a strong ambition to become a smart and enabling regulator. That will become more critical as the focus shifts from authorisations to compliance monitoring and enforcement. Our current revenue model is a barrier to making those big shifts. We see little change through RMA reform that will affect this service, apart from it becoming an increasingly critical function, or local government reform outside of centralisation, which we don't have any sight of at the moment. The key change for us here is to alter the user pays revenue recovery from time and materials to a mix of time and materials and annual fixed fee. So last time we discussed this function, you saw key priorities was a continued compliance improvement program, including focus on risk, property and digital enablement, and to gain approval and implement a new compliance revenue model. The key assumptions were that the new revenue model would be adopted and cost recovery will be managed in line with existing revenue policy, that the resource management compliance function needs to be prepared for an external shift. However, that's unlikely before year 2 of the long-term plan. And a shift to more permitted activities via resource management reform will require adjustment. Your initial indication was a split between reducing and improving this function.
Great. I'm just thinking for this one, what might be helpful is if we do 2 separate discussion sections. We give everybody the opportunity to first talk about the switch in fixed fee, and then we come back and do the overall direction for the service. Yep. I think that would be helpful to get some real clarity on the fixed fee and whether we want to put this forward in the long-term plan. The only exception to that is I'll make is Councillor Lamont is going to be joining us online in about half an hour. So if you wanted to start, and if you wanted to incorporate all feedback, you can, and then we'll move just to the financing model before we have the overarching discussion. Does that suit staff? Yep, that'll be helpful. Great.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay, Chair. My question is around the fixed fee, which seems eminently sensible to my mind. The massive fishhooks I see is we're heading into this new environment that has been marketed, for want of a better word, as more cost-effective, cheaper, and I can see it, and excuse my turn of phrase, going down like a cold cup of sick with people, which the mitigation would need to be quite a comprehensive marketing spin on why it's better. I'm just wondering if you could unpack that for me a little bit.
Yes, I think there's at least 2 big decisions for council that will come from this, and one will be to decide upon an appropriate split within the revenue, the finance and revenue policy, within between 60 and 80. And the next one will be how to apportion those costs. Both will be difficult decisions for you as a council. Probably the latter one, the more difficult. That once landed would need to be accompanied by a very, very comprehensive communications campaign. Ultimately, those are the options that we'll be coming back to you with in our next discussion for LTP, but they are the difficult ones. The conceptually, you're right, it appears to be a no-brainer. As we dive into the detail of what that means, that will be where the conversation becomes quite nuanced and difficult.
And so the public will have an opportunity to provide feedback. If we do put this forward, right, if we do say, do we endorse the continued work on this and to bring it forward as an option, then through the long-term plan process, we will be able to enable feedback. But just picking up on what Councillor Lamont has said, has there already been some informal feedback from the public, or has this been tested elsewhere, whether consent holders find it helpful or not?
I've been party to informal conversations around, as previously been highlighted by Shannon, around industry would like confidence around the budgets of like what would the cost of compliance look like for them. When we speak to TAs, that's certainly they'd like more certainty around costs. We also hear the negative around, and Brett alluded to it. We currently monitor repeatable things all the time, and there's a burden on the same landowner. I saw you last year, or you're back here again, and so there's the argument against that as well, to say, well, actually, if we move to a risk-based monitoring program, we might not necessarily need to continue to see the same people year on year out. So, but we've not formalised any of those conversations, really. They've just been anecdotal feedback.
Perhaps we're not first council to do this. And there's a number of others who have moved from the model we currently have to this model. And I think we should do some work to speak to them about how did they make this transition, what were the risks that manifested, and we'll do that.
Great, thank you. Since we are we've already got some names on the list. I will go through the names in order. And if you are going to be talking about the overall service, then we'll just move on, because I think we'll keep the conversation right now into some direction on the annual fixed fee, and then wrap around. So the first up was Councillor Campbell, then Councillor Robinson.
Every time you've talked about this, I've liked it more. And so one of the things that stuck out to me, which hadn't been mentioned before, I think, was that one of the outcomes might be a disincentive to bank consents. And I can see that being a winner everywhere, quite frankly. And contrary to my friend over the table there, I actually think it would get widespread community support. And if I put myself in the place of one of those brewers or farmers or quarriers or whatever who keep getting hit with compliance monitoring because it's easy, then I'm voting for this. And I don't think it's a hard sell to others to say you will have certainty in your budget, and every now and then you might be monitored, but it's going to be much more certain and much fairer. And the thing that made me go, wow, was the unrecovered costs putting 1.75% on general rates. If this solves that, then that is huge, quite frankly. And I do have stuff to say about the next bit, but I'll leave it there.
Great, so Councillor Robinson.
No, thanks. First up, I just would appreciate a little bit of clarity on something. If we're looking at doing a fixed fee for compliance, are we not already doing that already in some elements of what we do? Because it says annual recurring compliance fees for water consent fixed compliance fee is $230 per year per permit. How does this differ? Is it on top of, or is it for specific outcomes? Otherwise we might be just doing the same thing again.
So you're correct. We do charge a fixed fee for water consents that have a data component, and that's recovered currently. This would be a broadening of fixed fees that would have that would recover costs across a bigger area, 28,000 consents. I think the water, I don't know if Jennifer will correct me, I think that relates to about 2,500 consents currently. So we'd be talking about an expansion of that. But yes, there is precedent for it, but it would be applied on a larger scale than it currently is.
With that in mind, and adding to that, I fail to see how it could assist in the stopping so much the banking of consents for water compliance if it's already done to a certain extent already. So yeah, I have reservations. I was won over initially in the initial conversations, but looking into it, I just need some.
There will likely be consent holders that are not using the consents, whether that's water related or some other activity, that if they're not monitored, they're not no charges are being sent to them. So if there was an annual fee, that might prompt the decision to say, well, do I surrender my consent because I don't want to pay an annual fee? That will happen across the activities. There could be a number of people that have got have got water consents that are not using them, that might make the decision to go, I'm happy to give that back. So I think it could happen across a whole number of activities.
So just because I just want to expand on Councillor Robinson's question slightly, because it got quite narrowed into whether consent holders will surrender their consent. But there was actually a question in there about where the costs burden currently lies and the overall cost efficiency of the entire regulatory system. And if it would be helpful to understand, because there does seem to be individual line item costs for consent holders. And so how does this change the overall efficiency of the cost system and where burden comes with the cost?
So at the moment, if you get monitored, you bear the cost. Under the new system, it would be all resource users. So we would go from looking at actual and reasonable around the time and money spent monitoring an individual consent and the cost going to the individual consent holder, to looking at actual and reasonable as is our current total costs of our compliance, monitoring and enforcement function actual as reasonable, and so we will recover the actual costs from the 28,000, depending on how you want to apportion the costs, rather than the 3,500 that get monitored every year.
And so if you take that to a level higher, that just outside of compliance and over the entire regulatory system, and that we're going to have more permitted activities, for example, so is there a shift in the entire cost efficiency of the system at the moment that this will contribute towards or detract from?
I think at the moment we can only recover from consented activities, and the actual and reasonable cost of monitoring consents. Having a fixed fee and a large budget allows us to start to monitor permitted activities. I would hope, and I don't know, but as legislation becomes enacted that requires more permitted activities and the monitoring of it, that we have some way of recovering costs.
Okay. Did you want to add anything? No, I'm comfortable with that. Councillor Robinson, did you have a supplementary follow-up on that?
Yes, it's more of the commentary that goes with it. I mean, you brought up some of the commentary I was about to add, but it's still feel, especially if it's been used in a permitted activity manner, it would still come across as, for me, or a spectator, perhaps, as a general rates use, as opposed to a banking of money from where. You know, like it would have to be very specifically targeted. Social license.
Sorry. I don't know if this is helpful, but the hourly charge means that every interaction has got to be reasonable. You've got to recover your time, and we've already had this conversation around the repeatableness of it, and so we spend our time in the least complex, least risky compliance spaces, and that's not delivering to the outcomes that I think you've set as a body. If we consider a fixed fee across 28,000 consents, it's likely some of those consents will go away, that's for sure. I'm not necessarily saying that we would monitor permitted activities, but we would definitely monitor risk-based complex that delivers on outcome. And I think that's what you're potentially deciding here is we've discussed risk-based prioritisation and reduction of risk and delivering on outcomes. I don't think it's possible to deliver that through the hourly rate approach that we do. It's likely more achievable through a fixed fee approach.
Just a wee bit of commentary then. I guess the permitted activity situation, a lot of that is going to be out of our control. And then the other alignment could be discretionary, of which might be currently not permitted, or, so I understand there needs to be scope to add to that as well. So I hear you, but I'm not quite convinced of where that sits. Sorry, that's my commentary.
Okay. So next is Councillor Faulkner and then Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you. I too like the idea from a business perspective, from both from Environment Canterbury and as a consent holder. I think it has a certain degree of attractiveness, but the detail around it is the thing that I'm most concerned about. And got 3 questions, and they go to the consequences. The first one: if you receive a invoice in advance and you don't pay it, are you non-compliant? And then the second one, the potential introduction of account management service. How much work's been done on that? Because I find that account management a very attractive option for consent holders. I see that, and I've been talking about that for quite a period of time. So has that work stream been worked on? And the disincentive to bank consents. I'm kind of the jury's out in my mind on that one. Do you have some numbers wrapped around the potential consents that could be surrendered?
The first question was around, if you say got an invoice, you didn't pay it, would you be non-compliant? That doesn't make you non-compliant in a kind of an RMA compliance nature. We have that currently where we go through debt management, basically. So it's a different type of non-compliance, but not necessarily related to your consent. The second question was account management. I think the premise of account management is I think Claire touched on it in the previous session. There's a whole lot of benefit to work with those big consent holders, those big industries. They're likely to have a lot of consents. And so is there an opportunity to say, hey, how can we provide a service that helps you manage those consents, ensuring that you're compliant, but providing one officer that's reasonably experienced and talented to be able to do that in the most efficient way? And I think there's an opportunity to build on what we've set up. I think account management for TAs and irrigation schemes is a really important approach that you could consider. And the last one question was
potential consents being surrendered. Sorry. Yeah, we are making some broad assumptions there. Ultimately, that comes down to the personal, what is cost benefit? What's the cost of this annually versus the benefit to me holding a consent?
Okay, so next is Councillor Mackenzie. That's
Thank
right.
you.
I'd already indicated that.
Look, I've got 2 bunches of questions, if I may. The first is around the detail of how you'll differentiate between different consent types by risk, those that are already involved in audited self-management, recognition and reward for those, let's say, for land use consents where they're at the top of the game compared to those who are at the bottom of the game. Have you got a view as to how you might do that? And I see, you've got on the green page, you infer that there will be a differentiation of costs depending on type and risk. Be interested. You may not have the detail, but I'd be interested in the broad concept of how you might be trying to assess that risk and therefore the differentiation.
Yeah, that's the work we need to do. So there will be a number of models we can run around risk. We could run scale and magnitude. We could run degree of monitoring we think would need to be put to the different categories of consent. That is work we will do and come back. If we get approval to move forward, to come back with those models, that'll be a conversation we come back, and that'll set out how we start to apportion costs.
And then, so my other question then goes to how the consent holders community will hold the regional council to account to make sure that your costs are reasonable, fair, and auditable, if you like, and that goes to so that this isn't just a revenue collecting basis where you could, but B, perhaps more concerning is if the government makes the changes, we have, instead of 28,000 consents, we have 5,000 consents and 23,000 permitted activities. Will your overhead cost of consent compliance still sit there, and that'll all be loaded on the 5,000 consents that are left, and you use that money to look for compliance around permitted activity? I guess there's assurances around those sorts of systems, and if I was involved in lobbying for those who have consents, that might be the sort of question: is where's the surety that we're not going to get ripped off?
Yeah, I think we're back to our value for money question again, and we need to work on that and how we add value for money. If our consent population scales down, I predict we would scale down our compliance monitoring and enforcement proportionately or to some level. That, like most, if you've got a large population, you need a large a larger service, and the opposite applies, unless we start to see the stronger desire for permitted activity monitoring, but that would come through national instruments, I would hope.
And look, with your indulgence, if I just make a comment, my philosophical position is that I believe in, full cost recovery for services when they're specific services. So I'm not opposed to what you're proposing, but I think there has to be some safeguards to make sure that that cost recovery is fair and reasonable and efficient, and everything else that goes with it.
Yeah, and I guess ultimately it will fall back to us as staff to provide the justification for the resource that is applied to this function, and it would be for a decision for council as to the size and scale of that resource, and how it wishes to, how much it wants to withdraw from a consented population to deliver it.
Great, thank you. I think it is really important that once we've asked the questions and had them answered, that we do provide that commentary. It is really helpful to, because that's the point of today, right, to give some feedback about, do we continue this work in this way? So please continue to do that after you've asked your questions.
If I can just add the other part I was going to say in my feedback is that I suspect that the two questions I've asked will be to the questions at the top of the list from consent holders, and if you can answer those clearly and effectively, then you're less likely to get pushback.
Great, thank you. So next we have Councillor Gerard and then Councillor Claire Mackay.
Well, it's probably leading from Ian, because he is actually talking about some major hurdles, that, well, not hurdles, but, steps along the way. But my question is around about whether from day one in 2027 we would be able to undertake this, and if not, what are the hurdles that may be a means of stopping this process?
I think once we've done financial modelling, it's literally sorry, can you hear me? Once we've done the financial modelling, I think it's simply a case of presenting that information, getting consensus and backing for it, and then it's about communicating it. So I wouldn't see next year being a problem. Yeah.
Councillor Claire Mackay.
I'm not averse to looking at potential options. I do have some concerns, and I think Nettle's I'm aligned with Nettle's thinking around where we go, the risks, in the context once again of reform. Is it something? I don't think it's probably going to be that easy a sell necessarily when when I just think I've just put one landowner down here and they're potentially going to, they've got 3 consents, for example. Some might have more, but then we've got a data water charge. How would you conglomerate that? So I mean that's getting into detail, and that's a piece of work still to obviously be done. But I do think there are some risks, and I wonder whether we as an organisation, given that potential for change in the near future, is this something that we need to move forward to try and meet in a halfway situation, because I mean really we can't keep going on when we're only recovering 32%. Is I would like staff to think about a staged process to get us over 2 or 3 years into that policy guidelines that we've currently got. I think that would be easier than a big jump for a whole lot of people right now who probably haven't seen a compliance inspector or had any monitoring for 2, 3, 4 or 5 years, maybe for some activities, particularly if we've got 28,000 consents. As you say, we go to 3,500 per annum or whatever the figure might be, and a lot of them will be the same people that get seen year by year. So to suddenly have this land on the other 25,000, don't think that we're not going to get some pushback, because we actually will. And John and Jan are in the room, and they might remember the conversation we had around the $200 water charge. Now that actually got put on because we were urgently, desperately looking for $1 million, which at the time was 2% off our rates reduction. So the magic figure came in, and we've got 5,000 of these, and we've charged them all at 200. We got our $1 million or whatever it was at that point in time. So that's how that actually came in. And then if you actually went back and looked at all the stuff in the revenue and financing, the description actually morphed into something what we've got today. So that's from the first transitional council. So and that didn't go down that well, actually, I don't think. I think we did have fights, and I know we still have the odd fight now with people that are reluctant to pay their $230 charge. So look, I'm fine with the ethos of users pays, and I'd love to see it wider over the organisation, particularly in public transport, because there are some benefits of doing the compliance for the general person. But I am concerned, and it's been raised by a number of people, Megan, Genevieve, Ian, around the recovery from the PA. And so I don't want it all to turn out that you're collecting your money from X number of consent holders in 2 years' time.
No wonder, therefore, based on that part of the next work could be showing us examples of how this would impact on, for example, a TA who holds X consents for a wastewater treatment plant, for example, and a Marampa farmer, or give us some examples of what the actual impact will be on the consent holders would be helpful. And the other part that might be helpful, based on what Councillor Mackay said, was and a little bit of Councillor Robinson about what I've heard from you is that there are some low-hanging fruit that are getting seen by our compliance team more regularly than others, and that it's not actually proportionate to the risk. So what would be helpful to see demonstrated are some actual examples to go, here's some activities that haven't really been getting regular review but are higher risk and should have done and will do if we implement this. So some real examples in the next steps frameworks would be helpful. And Councillor Davis.
I understand administration fees because I pay them all the time. I understand license to operate. I get that, and I think the public get that, and I see that we do need to have some sort of alignment with the rest of the country. If we're the only ones who basically are way over here doing this like this, I think it's time that we could sell it as, look, we're just trying to get aligned here because we're trying to simplify our country's operating systems. So anyway, again, what Claire said, it's how we do it. It's not, I think we need to do it. I don't think we have a choice really, because what we're doing isn't going to get us where we want to go. but it's how we do it. So whether you stage it, or maybe we just, explain it. And the further south you go, the more tight they are. And Paul, you work there, so what's happening in Southland?
Southland had a mixture of fixed fees and hourly rates, so they kind of were somewhere in the middle, I think, from where we are. But it probably back to Ian's sentiment that you have to be able to justify the reasonableness of it, and I think if we can do that, like the existing charge for water is just for water data, so basically you'd be the fee would include the labour that we're using to ensure that resource consent holders are compliant. So I think there is a reasonable justification, but it needs to be abundantly clear. And then to Claire's point, because we are here and other organisations are here, it might be appropriate for the council to consider a staged approach because it would be very different. I know that, again, to the chair's comments, that we're seeing the same landowners regularly who may have been compliant the year before, and we're seeing them nonetheless who may also have an A-grade farm environment grade. I'm not sure we're managing risk there. And then at the same end, we've got a bunch of really complex consent holders that we invariably really struggle to get to because it's really complicated and takes hours of research before you can get out the door, that are not experience any of those charges. So I think it's all reasonable. It's just how we do it, and I think that's will be the ongoing conversation around this table, is how we would apply this.
Yeah, no, very good. We've got two more councillors with questions, but I would just make an observation that when we just talked about reform, one councillor saw reform as, well, there's a lot of change happening here and therefore staged approach is best. And then what I heard from another councillor is, actually, we've got an opportunity to actually do it all at once because this is what central government are directing us to do. So, yeah, everyone has a different lens to the same thing. So that's the beauty of bringing together all of the minds. So we have Councillor Sunkel and then Councillor Moody.
Thank you. I'm not opposed to what we're thinking about, and if I look at some of those extremely complex consents that may sit with a TA or a major industry, they would be paying considerably more than I would as a farmer. That said, I would have 6 or 8 consents that I would be paying an annual fee for the opportunity of holding them for. So how we apportion to based on risk and opportunity, but it does make some sense. And I just make a comment to permitted activities. If legislation rolls as we think it might, there is the probability of increased permitted activities, and yet I hear some folk at this table who get quite concerned that we aren't actually monitoring permitted activities, and those activities that are permitted and happen still create a challenge for the environment. So I do believe that there needs to be an ability to monitor some of those permitted activities as a general overview, and how do you do that and fund that if you don't have the funding there. Yes, more than happy for it to come out of general rate, but equally those folk with the permitted activity who have been through a process to get to that permitted space do have some responsibility. So I just see a wee bit of a balance in there. I'd hate to be accused of ramping up the cost to everyone out in the community that holds a consent or a permitted activity. But I think there is a balance in trying to achieve and then be able to look at real risk. I pay that $200 or $230 per consent for an irrigation consent, which is about the collection, holding of data and analysis. I know there's a bunch of folk over there that see the real risk or perceived risk of over-abstraction of water. I see bugger all. There's my limits, there it is, I operate within that space. I can see real risk sitting in permitted activities or other activities that never get monitored that would have significantly more impact on the environment than the stuff that we actually focus on at times. So again, I just think the ability to have a widening purview across the receiving environment, I think, is important. I'm going soft, I'm getting green.
And Councillor Moody.
Don't you get too carried away. I've recovered.
I agree. There's a lot of industrial consents and all sorts.
Yeah. Bravo. I agree 100% with Councillor Sunkel. You've nailed it.
What's happening, John?
Oh, it's time to leave.
You've nailed it. Look, I commend this annual fixed fee to the council. I mean, I outlined the problem, earlier on today and signalled that I felt the solution was coming, around incident response and our very limited resource to deal with everything out there, few staff and not the money, and how that affects community confidence in us. And here is a way to address the community and improve community confidence in us. We've heard about business and how, for business, you'd prefer generally to have a predictable, budgetable annual cost rather than an unpredictable, could be really big if you get monitored, or it could be nothing. Generally, as people, we prefer reliable consistency rather than shocks. We've heard about permitted activities and how those are going to be much more important as signalled by central government moving forward. And of course, it's the permitted activities that are often the sources of the pollution, because the consented staff is being monitored, and that's the things that people call up about, but we don't have the money to address the environmental outcomes around the permitted activities until we change our model. I've been 10 years working in this field. This problem is well understood amongst staff and practitioners, and now we have an opportunity to solve and address the problem, which is wonderful. Get into this proactive monitoring, prevention rather than cure, not be the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff when the phone rings and the public's seen something, but actually have money and staff to go out there and stop it before it happens, and do that fairly and come in line with the other regional councils in New Zealand. Freeing also the consents. So, Genevieve, I think freeing up of underutilised historic consents which are banked, surrendering them, because I didn't remember I had that consent anymore. That is good for business, because that resource is then free for somebody else to actually use for productivity for our nation. And it's also good for environment. If it's genuinely not needed, it can go back to nature if we're thinking of, say, a water consent. So good for nature, good for business, and good for our general rates. 1.75% reduction in general rates. So this is just a win-win-win. And I have heard all the concerns and reservations and process and staging, and fair enough. That's our job as governors to have those checks and balances in place. And I hope that we move forward through them and get with the program with the rest of the country. Kia ora.
I actually just have a follow-up question on that, because I had not seen that this was going to change our service performance measures or levels. So if I'm actually going, will this will change how we look at risk and how we assess risk, but it's not going to change the service performance level, because that's going to be our next discussion, right? In the next 15 minutes, we're going to spend some time saying, is this service as it's delivered, as it's proposed to be delivered, the right level of service? And if this is fundamentally, the proposal of a fixed fee is going to fundamentally shift the level of service from what we've been doing, then I think that's a different proposition altogether. And so that has to come across. There's a difference there, right?
Yes. I'm just trying to work that one through in my mind. It will shift our level of service, I think, by being able to cover more with what we've got.
Right. Okay. Right. So now that ties in lovely to what we are going to spend the next few minutes on, which is looking at the service. And remember, at the very before we went to lunch, I said this was one of those areas that was half saying pull back and half saying go harder. now's the time to give that direction. I think that we've got some pretty clear direction that we do endorse for staff to continue to work on the fixed fee. I think that we allow a few minutes for councillors to actually have some overall comments now on the service and whether it's where the shift really is here. So we'll start with Councillor Sunkel and then Councillor Campbell.
Thanks. No. So for me, if compliance staff have to charge out and do their time, they work to what they have to do or the perceived or whatever. If we have the money up front, then that ability to assess risk and look at the challenges that might be there with no great opportunity to charge back does shift to service. So if the outcome of the service is to protect or improve the environmental outcomes of whatever's happening in that receiving environment, then we are definitely shifting the service by freeing up the staff to look at real risk as opposed to perceived risk or where the money sits at a time. So I see both the ability to assess risk and do something about it, and the outcomes and the level of service. So for me, the level of service is the protection of the environment or the reassurance that the environment's in a safe place.
Can I just check one question on that then, just to make sure that I'm seeing it right? And so therefore, would the shift in service be dependent on the fixed fee?
It's either the fixed fee, which then frees up staff to go, I can look at risk and assess risk or step out of the building, knowing that there's no great return on that investment if you look at it from a business sense, as opposed to saying, I need to do X pieces of work a day to cover the cost to the business, if that makes the difference. So I just see it as that. The other way would be to increase the general rate, put the general rate into that situation where compliance and monitoring is funded by the general rate, which then frees people up to look more broadly across the environment and not be, I guess in a commercial sense, required to make $1 every time they step out of the building. If we go to the fee, they don't have to make $1 every time they step out of the building, but the outcome may well be a bloody sight better than achieving on the other side where they will make $1 for the organisation to cover their costs.
Great. It's Councillor Campbell, then Councillor Mackay, then Councillor Robinson.
So if I look at the initial indication from council was split between reduce and improve, throwing my mind back to that time, at that time we were fairly certain that a lot of this function was going to go over there somewhere. And I think that's where a lot of the reduce came from. We're not going to be doing much of it anymore, so reduce. Or we're going to be doing less of it, so reduce. I personally think this is a no-brainer. And so the advice to improve service delivery within existing budgets, as you've outlined, is one I can 100% get behind. And there may be some risks. We can sort them out as we go along. It may require an excellent communication strategy and campaign. We can do that. I find myself agreeing with Councillor Sunkel. The world is, this is going to get this is going to get better outcomes for the same amount of money, and that's just a win-win-win.
Then Councillor Claire Mackay.
Look, I think there's some benefits of having some money in the bucket to start with, to allow us to make those assessments on the risks, and then we are going out, and that's where we're focusing. I mean, I still have some reservations around the detail of it and everything. I sit here though, and I've actually filed away my colourful thermometer, but it just worries me is we sit here and we've had these early discussions and it's all very nice that this is what we want. But at some stage very soon, and I know the staff are going to bring this back to us, is hell, sorry, shouldn't swear on TV, but what is the reality here? So while I say, yeah, improve the service with the current budget, I think we've got to improve the service probably with a slightly lesser budget, acknowledging that we'll have a split from where that pool of money comes from. So, Paul, you want to say something?
Just might be helpful just to have slide 61 up just to see what we decided last time. And then Councillor Robinson, then Councillor Mackenzie.
Thanks. Look, I'm all for a fee, whether or not it be a one fee fits all. I don't think that's appropriate. It has to be within a certain spectrum, and it based basically on the consentable activities risk assessment. And the big thing that I think too is the unknowns of the currently not permitted activities moving into permitted is a big thing. We actually probably don't know what's going to happen. So there needs to be an adjustable slider for who pays what based on risk. And if they're doing a really good job, then that's adjustable in the future. But for now, I don't think $200 sitting as like a wee is adequate, because I look at the vessels that come into port have to pay a pollution's response tax, and that is, divvied up or given back in different times. But in general, it's an insurance program ahead, and if you prove to do well over time, then yeah, most of it's given back or it's incentivized later. But I just think it could be perceived as slightly gimmicky, or it could be a really good tool. And I don't know where I sit on that realm yet, because we've got some cleaning up to do and there's future cleaning up to do, and I don't know what that expense looks like. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know.
So thank you for that commentary. That's gone back to the fixed fee, right? That's what
we're talking about.
No, we've moved on to the service as a whole. So,
sorry, I thought it was general commentary in the whole,
which is fine. And so, from a general service kind of perspective, what the staff, the direction or the real direction is, do we agree with what's been proposed today as a continued work program?
Yes.
And last time we had some pullback and move forward, and we've had different people explain why they might have put the dot somewhere. For me, I put the dot in the red and the reduce. And the reason I did that was not necessarily because I thought it was going somewhere else. It's because I thought whilst we're moving into a heavily reform focus, we couldn't put our green, we only had X amount of green dots that we could put up. And we had to make some pretty hard decisions on where the red dots should be. And for me, I chose compliance as a red dot and planning as a green dot, because if you get the planning framework right, then you're actually going to have less need for the compliance. So that was my reason for that. And I sit there still. That's still how I feel about the service. I'm still a reduce, except for the efficiencies that could be gained through the fixed fee. So I've jumped ahead, and it's actually Councillor Mackenzie's.
I don't know if I feel the same, but that's right.
Councillor Mackenzie's next, and then Councillor Gerard.
So you've just made the exact point that I was going to make, and that is that compliance is dependent on the consent conditions. They're dependent on the plans and the rules and the regulations, and and you can actually make a huge difference to the requirement for compliance by getting the consent conditions right. And we've still got, we're just discussing in the break, requirements for dairy farmers to put paper copies up of their emergency response plan inside their cowshed. Well, who goes down when a pipe bursts? Who goes down to the cowshed to remind yourself of a telephone number you have to ring when it's already on your mobile phone, and you do it from the point of emergency? And so there's a bit of cleaning up to do to move into a new regime, and I think that's critical. And that's the same point that you're making from a more of a dirty boots perspective.
Councillor Gerard.
Take it the other way, though. It's sort of like a plan can sit on the shelf. It's really what happens on the ground that really counts, and it's where compliance comes in. So I think fixed, I'm ready for the fixed fee, and I'd rather, I'm trying to think about the red dot. I'm sort of thinking it could be a reduction in rates and more user pays. So that's why I'm thinking, we could reduce, but we can actually enhance our performance. So when, so I sort of see that the consent holders can see this as a service rather than something to avoid. It's a service to them that we're providing, and they want to see that their neighbours being, that neighbour's not doing a very good job out there, that somebody's going to come in and, monitor that problem. So it's sort of like, I think that's a way of actually engaging the industries. Like I was talking about a stormwater, it's an industry area in Napier that I was working under, and they had a stormwater working group. And again, it was each one looking at each other going, whoa, they're not doing their job. So it's sort of like, I think it's a way of changing the culture. And so, and I'd like to see it based on an activity, as Ian was saying, and a bit like ACC, different categories. So, okay, thank you. And thank you for really, undertaking this work. It's great. And thank you.
So now is Deputy Chair Cranwell.
Kia ora tātou. Yeah, great presentations today. Good, look, going into depth and awesome, great discussion around the table with the chairing today. Kia ora, Megan, thank you for that. I did go the green dot on this, and as Brett and Paul know that I'm in compliance. Monitoring is a big issue, not only a lot in the community and especially Runanga as well. I would love. I'm similar to Chair Mackay today that I did go green on the planning because you'd like to, and there's been discussion around the table, you'd like to get it right up here, so therefore you didn't have to worry about compliance and so. But at the moment I can't see that, so that's why I did green here as well. And improving service delivery with existing budgets, I can agree with that. And I know moving forward, Councillor Claire Mackay, mentioned that somewhere we've got to look at this and we've got to kind of go through that. But sometimes we kind of say all what we want, and then when it comes back, and then we have to find, and then that's when I suppose negotiations and the debate comes across the table. But I'm glad to see that to improve service delivery within existing budgets, and then when you come back, we can, discuss some of that even more. But if we can get it, right at the top. Therefore, when it comes down to this, permitted activities. Probably Genevieve kind of mentioned it. Can we go there right now? It's going to. We're going to move into the next over the next years or years that we can actually see how it plays out with the reforms and etc. But at the moment, I'm happy with staff advice, improved service delivery with existing budgets, and then we can work through that in the next couple of months before Christmas. Kia ora.
Great. So Councillor Davis and then Councillor Moody.
I have full confidence in you guys because it's practical. You think that being practical is like rocket science these days because no one's practical anymore. So Honestly, I believe you can do all the service measure will increase because we've asked you, because we were at that Wilson Farm and I was talking to the people who do this, the people in the office up there. They know exactly what needs to happen. They know exactly where all the little gaps are. They know. And I'm thinking, well, why don't we just ask them? So here we are. So I'm fully for it. And the service measure will be fine. I know you can do this within budget or less. I'm happy. It's 20.7 million divided by 1,300 is 21K per consent. I mean, it's not peanuts. No, it's 2.7 million in this portfolio, but if you divide it by 1,300 consents. Oh, what was the 13? That's the permitted activities. Oh well, then yeah, we're behind the 8 ball. Yep, but that's local government. So,
Councillor Moody.
So look, I put a green dot, but I'm happy to go with the staff advice to just maintain the existing budget and why we'll need the budget that we have, modest as it is, to do this transition work to the more effective outcomes-driven program that's proposed. Plans are only as good as the adherence to them on the ground. They are just a piece of paper until we have the educational and enforcement work out on the ground with our communities. I mean, we've spent over 50 million on freshwater plans, and so this is a much smaller amount that we spend to actually ensure that the plan is implemented. Just maintaining our budget, and with we won't get the money immediately from this proposal in time. It'll come in, and so we'll still need our baseline budget to get to there. Yeah.
Before we move into wrap up, I just wanted to check in with Councillor Faulkner. Everybody has really engaged on this particular compliance topic, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to invite you if you had any comments that you would like to add before we move into the wrap-up.
I think everybody's made the valid comments, and I just go back to what I said before. I'm supportive of the work, and I think it's going to potentially be a little bit of a game changer, but it's the detail, and it will be it changes the service performance, and just wanting to have a look at all those pieces. But if I was on 80% satisfied.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Are you taking us through the wrap up, or you are?
I'd reflect back what we've heard.
Let's do that.
First of all, thank you for this. Paul and I were super excited to go through a 69-page PowerPoint with you today, and so I thank you for bearing with us and managing our excitement. Also, thank you very much for your guidance on the function. There's been very helpful comments, and it's really given us some direction. So thank you very much for that. We'll go ahead and work in partnership with finance to come back with you with the options that start to flesh out this split and apportionment discussion, which will help you make your final decision on where you go with the consultation in your LTP. That's perhaps there's one point of you want to make your point.
Do you want me to do it? Councillor,
sorry, I got you.
Councillors, if we go back to just a point on authorisations, you'll remember that Brett sort of signposted. Currently, the split is 64 versus, what would that be, 30, whatever. And that's currently, and we're not quite achieving that at this stage because we're seeing a reduction of consents coming through. And there was a point where we said we would prefer to be at 60-40. Invariably, there would be an implication for you. why we haven't said that that's an increased LTP percentage on your thermometer, because you might opt to manage that. You might choose not to do it. You might choose to do it and manage that through fees and charges adjustments. So I just wanted to be really clear that we haven't presumed that could be. It may have an implication on LTP and your general rates, but there's other levers that you could look at. So I just wanted to signpost that for you. Yeah.
You've generated some questions, which is fine, but I wanted to start with Councillor Gerard, because she actually was the only councillor who had her name down for the authorisations session and didn't have the opportunity to ask a question. So it's fine? Okay, great. So then we've got Councillor Mackenzie and Councillor Campbell who have a question on that, I presume.
On moving forward. So my question is, you said you would talk to finance and start to flesh out the ideas. Would it be wise to go to consent holder groups, whatever they might look like, whether it's Federated Farmers or Irrigation New Zealand or TAs just pass on their costs, so I'm not sure they're a good sounding board, but whatever it is, quarries, whatever the groupings might be, just to ask them about how you might do the differentiation, a few things like that, and rather than it be heard about through the sort of grapevine and then you get a reaction.
I think, yes, possibly. It is before any decision's been made, but we could definitely, and there's a number of options we could go with. I think we need to think. I take your point, and it's a good one. And at some stage, we need to. Whether it's now, I'm not sure.
Okay, Councillor Campbell.
So back to the 60/40 charges and rates. I had also been going to raise that possibility, and when Sarah raised it, I didn't need to. But and again, just for our information, and so that we can make good decisions. Again, it would be really good to come back with some examples and some comparisons of what our rates are now compared to other regional councils, compared to consultancies in the industry, what difference it would make if we increased it to the high end of that, to the middle end of that, where that and even where we sit now. It would be really good to have that information.
Great, thank you. So a quick question from Councillor Davis.
When was the last time we adjusted the fee, just that $230 fee?
I think it was 2019, was it? I think.
Put in 2019. Okay. I think we made the decision in the first trimester, and it hasn't been adjusted.
Okay.
Just
core service lead, Claire.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going to go.
You have plenty of time.
Plenty of time to talk. I could cook my 15 minutes. I think just while I hear Councillor Campbell's question, and I'm sure staff will come back with it when they've looked at the fees and charges as one of the levers that's been talked about. Just remember that consultants out there provide services to the applicants that come in to this organisation. And it's all very well thinking, yeah, we'll put up our fees, but the consultants just ratchet their fees up as well. So that the actual difference, the grading stays relative. So all you're doing, if we're putting our fees up here, and I've had a quick look at some of ours, and we're pretty comparable, if not higher in some cases, to other councils. But just keep that in the back of your mind, if that is one of the levers, and staff will actually look at that. But I think all we're doing, I'll just make a comment on the second part, whether we're around the compliance and the user pays. We're just shifting the pots of money. The pot will still be the same or similar size. It's just who provides that pot of money. So, look, I thought it's been a good day too. So thank you, and thank you, Chair. You've done a great job.
Great, thanks. So, final slides just to run us through next steps. Well,
thank you for that great discussion. It's been really good sitting in the back there, listening to it and taking lots of notes. So we are taking a pause for a couple of weeks now in terms of having any LTP workshops, but we will come back and continue the deep dives in early September. We will look in when we can build in another round 2 of this discussion, because what we've got there at the moment is to cover the services you haven't already heard about in ERP and CPRH, but we will build in a round 2 for this in early September. We've also got a dedicated discussion on the financial policies as well to talk through, which our finance colleagues will lead. So we will keep going with these service level discussions. Everybody's right in that we are potentially adding more in, taking some out. There will have to be trade-off discussions in October, by which stage we will have a better first high-level draft of a budget for the organisation, and that's when we'll be coming back and having to make some, likely from where we are now, having to make some trade-off choices across all the core services. So we will do some work behind the scenes in terms of looking through our categories of should-dos for the work we do, could-dos, must-dos, what other efficiencies or savings we can find as well to bring back to councillors as part of that discussion. So, thank you for everything today, and we will continue in early September, and then through to some difficult conversations in October.
Great, thank you. Before we move to Councillor Faulkner for karakia and closing, just wanted to thank the staff team for all of the long-term plan work through to now. It's been a journey where we've gone from big thinking and general direction through to some specifics, and I think it's been done really well. The whole work program's been really good and engaging for councillors and enabling councillors to have discussion and voice. So thank you so much. Today in particular has been quite enjoyable for a topic that usually brings in a lot of values and emotion to the room. Everybody's engaged with it in a really meaningful way, and I think that comes down to demonstrating what the core service is and what it's proposed to be. It's always fun to play in the space of what next looks like rather than what we did yesterday, which is what we're doing now looks like and how well we're doing it, and looking in that next space of what are we going to do next is the exciting part for councillors. So thank you to all of the staff. It's been really well prepared and really enabling for us to have our voice. So thank you.
And thank you to the chair. You've done a fantastic long day too. Yep, thank you.
Councillor Faulkner.
Ko muto matoa mahi o e tēnei wā. Manaki katiria mai matoa katoa o matoa hai. O matoa whanau e o ki te arangi. Our work is finished for the moment. Bless us all, our colleagues, our families. Peace to the universe.
Good, well done. Thank you.